Welcome to everybody who's joined. We'll be starting in a few minutes, in about 10 minutes or so. Thank you for being on time. Maybe in the chat you can mention where you're from and which school do you belong to, or maybe which program you're in. Thank you for joining on time. We'll be starting in just a few minutes.
Hi, Mark. Is your audio working? I don't see audio next to your name.
Is it working? It should be working.
Yours is. I was testing one of our speakers, Mark Rogoff.
Am I in the right place? Is this the Climate Education Summit?
Yes, it starts at 3:30.
Right. Okay. So then my screen, I assume, will change at 3:30.
Correct.
Okay.
I thought this was automobile maintenance.
How you doing, Mark?
Hello there, Alvin. I love the picture you have, Ann Price. That's great.
It's one of my favorites.
How many people have signed up for this?
317 to be precise, Mark.
Wow.
A lot of people.
Is it all right if we cannot stay for the entire time?
Definitely no problem at all. And it will be live casted on YouTube, so we can share the link later on as well.
Fine. And since I'm registered, I assume I'm registered for tomorrow also?
Yes.
Okay. So I just go to the link.
In the same Zoom link. Yes.
I'm sorry?
The same Zoom link for tomorrow's session.
I didn't quite hear that.
Sorry, the same Zoom session
Yes.
link. Yes, you can use the same one for tomorrow's session as well.
Okay, thank you.
Radhika, I resent the First Lady the Zoom information, but if she takes a little while to get on, you have time because you said you had your introductions anyway.
Perfect, Alison. Thank you.
My name is Guracha. I'm Sustainable Development World Ambassador from Kenya. So now Kenya is also an ambassador of the United Nations. I've joined the meeting from Kenya. Thank you all.
Thank you. Welcome.
Wow, that's cool. Welcome. I'm sure everybody's very glad to meet you. That's cool.
Maybe we can write our places where we are from in the chat, if possible.
Yeah, that would be great.
The First Lady is signing on now, Radhika.
Okay. 2 more minutes, and then we can start. Thank you all for joining. And thank you all for joining early. And some of you have joined much earlier. Some of you have joined from Kenya and other places, international countries as well. So many thanks for joining this summit. I'll start with a couple of notes that I had written. I hope I remember all of them. But just to start by saying happy Lunar New Year for those of us who celebrated yesterday. And I think this is such a great month to be having this summit. It's the Black History Month, and what better way of celebrating Black history by discussing climate education and the climate education as well as the climate initiatives that every one of us has been involved in. My name is Radhika Iyengar. I am at the Center for Sustainable Development, Earth Institute, Columbia University, also a part of the climate school. There I work on international education projects, and I work on many different early literacy programs as well. So really honored to be a part of the organizing committee here for this New Jersey Climate Education Summit. This is the second in the series that we have done so far. The first one was last year. And I think I look forward to this summit because it gives me just again a reinvigoration and a orientation of where we need to be going, what are the different challenges, and what should be done. So I really look forward to these sessions. This event is organized by the Center for Sustainable Development at Earth Institute, also by New Jersey Audubon, Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and many other nonprofits have joined as well as a part of our panelists. The main mission for Alison, Mulch, and I have been to provide a platform to engage in a lot of discussions, have students present their work, And again, to share all the wonderful work that New Jersey has been doing across different schools and the communities. So we look forward to learning a lot from everyone who's participating here. We will learn, especially we will learn about the sustainable development goals. We learn about localizing other sustainable development goals. We learn about climate justice and what it looks like in the state of New Jersey, and what is the future of climate education in the schools and in the communities, and learn about what is currently going on. So really a plethora of things that we can learn today. Just a note from Alison and I that we are very welcoming of all ideas and all stakeholders here. So please, send us a note, and we'll be happy to engage with you with all sorts of discussions. Throughout the summit, we will hear from many different stakeholders, especially our local, from the local context. We'll be connecting to the state, we'll be connecting to the national context, as well as we'll be connecting to global perspectives as well through various voices, leaders. We have policy leaders, administrators, school staff, researchers, students, community members, and common moms like me who live in New Jersey, and children are going in public school system. So we want to hear from everyone who is around here. We are starting by a very special guest who has been spearheading climate education in the state and is an exemplar for other states in the United States as well as globally. This message is being broadcasted also in India and many other states. So we hear from none other than our First Lady, New Jersey's First Lady, Ms. Tammy Murphy. She's here, and we are delighted to have her here to give us a keynote speech and start this summit with her ideas and vision. First Lady, over to you, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Radhika Iyengar, thank you for that introduction. I also want to thank the New Jersey Audubon and Columbia University Center for Sustainable Development for the introduction and the invitation to be here today. And of course, all of you who are with us virtually for your interest in and commitment to a green future. I am thrilled that this is the second annual Climate Change Education Summit, because it tells me that despite the delays caused by the pandemic, the energy and momentum around climate change education has continued in full force since we made history with our first in the nation standards. Discussions like the one we are having today are essential to keep our efforts moving forward. Today's program will not only raise awareness of the challenges we face and the ways we can get involved in solving them, it will also remind us all that this is a team effort and that we truly have the power to make a change. That is an important thing to remember, especially when we read the headlines and see that gridlock in Washington has not relented, despite the overwhelming evidence that climate change is truly upon us. There is no doubt that our weather is changing. Across the nation, we have flooding, drought, and extreme temperatures. Storms are intensifying and becoming more frequent. When New Jersey was hit with Hurricane Ida, I saw firsthand the horrible destruction. Houses moved off of their foundations, mud piled high, people displaced, and sorting through their belongings. It was devastating to bear witness. But even more devastating were the stories of those who drowned in their houses or in their cars as they traveled through flooded roads to get home. This is no longer an abstract problem, but this is something that today's generation of students has recognized for a long time. And that is to our very great advantage. In September, the K-12 climate change education standards will be implemented across our state, making New Jersey the national leader of this movement. Since the passage of the standards in June of 2020, our Department of Education has been working with our school districts to develop plans for implementation. The department also developed a comprehensive website of resources to support educators as they integrate climate change education into their lessons, turning their classrooms and our communities into even greater incubators for cutting edge ideas, critical and creative thinking, and practical problem solving. And at the beginning of the next school year, we will be ready to hit the ground running. That means that from kindergarten through high school graduation, New Jersey's students will be considering the effects of climate change in every school subject, not just earth science. From engineering to advocacy to fashion design to the economy and everything in between, New Jersey's students will graduate prepared to face the causes and effects of climate change, regardless of their future field of study, training, or career path. Further, it is our hope that with this knowledge and preparation, our students will lead the nation in making the transition to a green future in their careers, their personal lives, and in their communities. The science is clear. The climate crisis will touch every aspect of our lives. Therefore, there is no industry that will be unaffected. I see our K-12 climate change education initiative as one piece of our overall strategy to move New Jersey closer to a green economy and a sustainable future. The New Jersey Council on the Green Economy, which I have the honor of chairing, is currently developing a long-term roadmap for building New Jersey's clean energy and green industries into powerful engines for job creation, economic growth, and equitable investments. That means that when you graduate from high school, community college, a training program, or college, New Jersey will be a state at the forefront of this movement with job opportunities that create good, family-sustaining jobs and improve the health of our planet. As the Council works on this blueprint, we do so with a constant and unyielding focus on social justice, equality of opportunity, and equity. Offshore wind, solar, electric vehicles, and more, the scope of our energy master plan and overall climate action strategies are designed to reduce pollution burdens that affect New Jersey's underserved and environmental justice communities, while growing our economy and helping us reach our goal of 100% clean energy by the year 2050. So I hope that what you take away from today's conference is that, yes, the threat of climate change is real and it is here. And yes, there are challenges we face that are deeply frustrating. But here in New Jersey, we are moving full steam ahead, and you are the biggest and most powerful part of our plan. So I urge you to get all you can out of your education. Start thinking about how climate change might affect your careers, not just the challenges, but the incredible opportunities of the green economy, and get involved. Look around your schools and communities, get involved with a local sustainability program, and if none exist, start one. As I said, and as my husband, Governor Murphy, has said many times, we have never been more optimistic for New Jersey's future. Thank you so much for having me. I wish you all the best for a successful conference. Take care.
Thank you so much, our First Lady. I think that the words have shown us, your words have shown us that you really rely on us to create the pathways of your vision, and hopefully we will be able to manage your expectation and march ahead with all the ideas, collective ideas that we have. So thank you so much for attending today, and thank you so much for sharing your vision with us. Having said that, I want to go over to our next panel, which is going to be this panel on policy, status of climate education in New Jersey, a policy dialogue. And so we will do that, but in a bit. First, I want to also introduce my partners in crime, Alison Mulch from New Jersey, Audubon, and just give a big round of applause to her, because she's really been the person who has helped us to make this session happen and make sure that it is the best that we can, produce in terms of the creativity and in terms of including everyone. Alison is a project director for School for Sustainability at NJ Audubon and has been working with thousands of educators and hundreds of public schools in New Jersey, focusing on best practices in school sustainability and through various programs that she's involved in, including the Eco Schools USA framework, including the New Jersey School Boards Association, including the Alliance for New Jersey Environmental Educators. And she's really spearheaded many programs which have really helped us to get inspired and helped us to take this climate education mission forward. Thank you, Alison, for co-organizing this event. Also, Jasmine Mora, she is my colleague at the Center for Sustainable Development, and she has worked with the Paraguayan government, works on the presidential delivery of the unit of Republic of Paraguay on education priorities. So welcome, Jasmine. Jasmine is also new to our team, and we hope that she is able to take on a lot of all of this work going forward, and also spread it to Paraguay and learn from Paraguay as well as we convene these sessions. So thank you, Alison and Jasmine. Jasmine has prepared a Padlet, so maybe we can share the Padlet here with everyone. I don't know if we can share the Padlet in the chat session, Jasmine. If you can, that would be great. So going over, without wasting much time, going over to our next panelists. On the topic is on status of climate education in New Jersey, a policy dialogue. So we have the best two people around to discuss this vision of working on policy and implementation at the ground level. We have Mark Rogoff, lead environmental education specialist at New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. And we also have John Henry, a senior manager, STEAM and sustainable schools, the best two people around to discuss this work. Thank you both for joining. We will ask you, before we share our questions, to actually talk about yourself and about your work, because we decided that we will definitely not do justice by doing a long introduction for both of you. So please go ahead and share your about your work and about yourself as we go ahead. With me, we have Rose. I don't see her yet, but hopefully she will join soon, or is she here? So many people joining, it's difficult to make out. Yes, Rose is from New York University. She is a student there studying global liberal studies with a concentration in sustainability. And she's interested in public health and is concentrating on public health as a stream. With that, I'll ask Mark to do an introduction, and then we can take it from there. Mark?
Thank you, Radhika. My name is Mark Rogoff. I'm the lead environmental education specialist with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. My job basically is to translate a lot of the very difficult to understand science that the department puts out to the general public, and make it understandable for children, preschoolers, public school students, middle school students, high school students, college students, and the teachers who actually teach them. Whether they are formal educators or non-formal educators, it is my job to provide resources that the department makes available to teachers and educators, and be sure that they're aware of the things that we make available, as well as support them in their jobs. Having been a teacher, I know it's an incredibly difficult task. Having been a student, I know that can be pretty challenging too. And the department has a lot of resources. We want to make sure that materials that are out there are specific to New Jersey. Now, New Jersey is quite diverse. We are a microcosm of the entire country. We have shorelines, we have highlands, we have rural areas, we have suburban areas, we definitely have nice urban areas, as well as some very overburdened urban areas. And it is the responsibility through my office and several other partner offices within the department to make sure that everybody is treated equally and with the most resources we can possibly get out to them.
Thank you so much, Mark. What a great responsibility and great privilege to be talking to you and to be listening to your work. It's just amazing. My question to you, and I'll ask Rose to follow up, is that NJ recently had this Ida storm. And as the First Lady also mentioned, a lot of experiences, a lot of bad experiences, a lot of learning lessons from Ida. So it has those, are those being included in the school education system, and how can we learn from this experience and integrate it into our climate education work in the schools?
Yes, Ida and other major storm events are not new to the Jersey Shore, but it is predicted that the occurrences of such storms will increase in frequency and intensity due to climate change, as First Lady Tammy Murphy mentioned. The NJDEP released a document called the 2021 New Jersey Climate Change Resilience Strategy. I will put the link in the chat with everything that I mentioned. At some point, you'll have just a whole mess of links that go to all of the different things I'll be referencing. This report provides a suite of forward-looking policy options to promote the long-term resilience to climate change. The strategy presents actions that support the resilience of the state's communities, economy, and infrastructure, including 125 recommended actions across 6 priority areas. For schools in the local communities, we have created, along with the New Jersey Audubon, a comprehensive guide titled Building Ecological Solutions for Coastal Community Hazards. I'll also post that website. This report puts forth practices that are used to help coastal communities become safer and more sustainable in ways that work with rather than against nature. The guide serves as a background information for teachers and students that use the module. The actions listed on the website demonstrate what teachers and students can do in their own communities.
Wow, that is very, very comprehensive, and we look forward to getting all those links so that we can learn also in the schools as well as in the communities. Rose is on. Rose, any questions as a student representative for Mark?
Yes, my question was, what climate change related topics do you think are the most important to focus on and learn about in our schools?
Good question. The teaching of climate change is complex and multidisciplinary. Today's students are the future leaders of the world and will fill the diverse roles of the public, local and state governments, mayors, governors, and presidents. As future decision makers, they will need to understand the big picture to ensure sustainability and smart growth. Understanding the basics of climate change from an early age to the complexities of the impacts and results of increased carbon dioxide throughout their school years is necessary to develop environmental and climate literacy. Students must understand the science behind climate change, the social impacts, including the even more drastic impacts upon overburdened communities, the financial impacts, local, regional, and worldwide impacts, and the actions that we can take to mitigate, reduce, and eliminate these impacts.
Thank you, Mark. We'll go over to John and also go back to Mark a little bit later to have more questions and to ask more questions. And can I request the participants also to use the chat session to write questions for John and for Mark, and we'll take the questions from the chat session as well. Thank you, Mark, for your intervention. Really appreciate your thoughts and words here. John, there's a question from, 2 questions from Rose and then 1 question from me, but I'll ask Rose to first ask her questions and then get back to me. Rose?
Is there a specific climate education policy that the school boards have agreed on? And does it differ in each district?
Before you ask the question, John, can you please talk about your wonderful work and about yourself a little bit, please? Thank you.
Well, thank you. And first of all, thank you for the invitation to be here today. I'm thrilled to be here. Thrilled to be on this panel with Mark, my friend and colleague I've known for a long time now. So my role at School Boards Association started around 10 years ago when I was asked to join the team there to actually train school board members in STEM and sustainable schools. And that was a kind of a first for the state. And I had to kind of start from scratch with that, but I had some experience and I've been in education for 28 years, formal education and a classroom teacher for 14. And then I stepped out to work at NASA headquarters in Washington, DC, where I got to work with some climate scientists, which was a great thrill for me. And I never went back to the classroom. And I've been doing this kind of work around the state. My role at school boards not only is training school board members, but also if we have workshops, we'll have superintendents, we'll have teachers, we'll have administrators, and the leadership of schools in general on a variety of topics. Of course, in my wheelhouse, it's be STEM and STEAM and sustainable schools. And I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of other organizations in the state over a number of years, creating programs, working with the Department of Education. So I've had a really good run for the last 10 years. When I was in the classroom, by the way, I was doing a lot of sustainability. I ran an electric vehicle program for a couple of years at the last high school I was at. So we started to get into electric vehicles we were early adopters, so to speak. But it's been a thrill to work with a lot of great educators, especially now that the climate change standards have kicked in. And we will be addressing these. And that wasn't the case a while ago. Like there was climate change, there's always a debate, and sustainability, what's that? And we are really ahead of the game in terms of New Jersey. We are way out in terms of other states as far as I see it. So that's kind of what I do with school boards. And most recently, though, I just still want to mention, and I don't know if we're going to have time to do it, but New Jersey School Boards Association and Sustainable Jersey put together a thought leader committee on climate change education. And we have a document that's going to be released actually next week, which is really a guidance document. And if we have an opportunity, I'll share some of the goals and objectives of that. But Mark was on that thought leader committee along with about 26 other people. And we have a document that was designed for the leadership to give them some guidance on how to proceed with climate change education in New Jersey.
Thank you, John. And addressing Rose's question, John?
So the question is, do we have a specific policy? Was that the question? A specific policy on climate change education currently in the state of New Jersey? We do not have a specific climate change policy. The reason being is because each individual school is local control, and they make their own, they create their own policies. However, School Boards Association does have, which I helped create along with our policy department, sustainability and then the environment, and now climate change. So we actually do have a policy that could be used by any school board in the state of New Jersey. And I'm happy to share that. I'll make sure that my email goes into the chat, or it can be shared by others, but I can get you a copy of that. It's our association produces a lot of documents that help guide board members in a variety of different topics, whether it's governance and policy. This particular one is specific to the environment. It's very comprehensive. In fact, I would guess right now that there's not many schools, districts that have a climate change policy per se. I haven't seen too many, but like I said, our association does offer that, and it is available. So as we move forward and more education is going to be put in and more standards are going to be put in, the Board of Eds are going to be looking at how they can support it. And the nice thing about the policy too, just so you know, is that once a policy is created and it's implemented into the school, and if it is about climate change or sustainability or the environment in general, it becomes part of the culture of the school. And what we have seen in the past is you might have a superintendent that's really, really pro sustainability, and they're moving it apart. They're moving it fast and they're pushing it forward. But what if that individual leaves the school? If it's not written in a policy, that initiative can potentially fade away. And that's the reason why policy is so, so important, is it becomes part of the culture of the school. And so, again, I offer this policy to anybody who wants it to take a look at it. The districts have their discretion if they could change the policy and add and delete some things in it, but it's there as an example and a model.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. Question from my end. And this may be a very naive question, so please excuse me for that. But
No worries, no worries.
Just wanted to know more about, maybe parents or green teams. How do we approach the Board of Education, or how do we approach the different boards that are there to suggest, climate education initiatives? Does each district have a policy that we can take a look at? What is your role in terms of making the school boards a little bit more responsible towards, wider dissemination of their documents and their approaches, like the policy that you suggested? I think it will be great to get a copy of the policy. But what is a more grounds of way of looking at that policy and maybe suggesting ways of what schools can do locally?
So that's a pretty big question. I think you mentioned in the beginning, what can the parents do or how? So first of all, parents can actually show up at a Board of Education open public meeting, and they can ask questions to the board. And so a lot of times the Board of Educations have a relationship with, of course, their PTA, their local PTA. But if you have individuals or a green team, which the green team, by the way, of schools are going to be part of the school, the Board of Ed is going to know about that, about the green team. They might not know all the intricate details of it, but what happens is the superintendent, by the way, is the liaison to the Board of Ed. So anything that goes on within the school, whether it's green team or any kind of functions, curriculum, things like that, that superintendent reports out to the Board of Ed. Then the Board of Ed makes decisions or asks questions to the superintendent. But as it relates to a public meeting, Board of Ed meeting, parents or anyone else for that matter who is local to the school, belongs to the school, related to the school, can show up at that meeting and ask questions and pose those questions to the Board of Education. Our job at School Boards Association, being a training organization of school board members, that's why we have workshops and training programs, Facebook Lives, to train school board members to be more informed. And the nice thing about that is the school board members are the decision makers of the school district. The more that they are informed about sustainability, climate change, the better they can handle answering questions and giving some guidance to the people who come in who are concerned or would like to see this move forward in their district. I don't know if I captured the whole entire question, but please repeat some of it and I'm happy to answer that part as well.
That's great, John. I think we have, at least now we know the entry point and we know that our questions can be asked. So I think that's great that at least we have a space there to ask our questions. That's great. Going back to Mark again. I think we have some. Going back to Mark again, Mark, it's very interesting to see in New Jersey how the Department of Education as well as the Environmental Protection Department has come together to work on climate education policy. And I think this is a very interesting concept of interdepartmental collaborations, and it would be great to have this lesson be learned by other states and by other countries. So any suggestions on how this was made possible and how we can actually go ahead to do this?
Necessity. That's the easiest way to describe it. Actually, communications, that's the key. Not only are my department's policies include education and outreach, and the DOE includes includes environmental issues and impacts and actions in their standards. So it's natural for the two work groups to work together. I mean, as the lead environmental education specialist for my department, my job is pretty much defined by my title. It's education. So it was easy to work with the other groups because, for example, my coworker, John, my co-presenter here today, John Henry, we were both public school teachers for both 14 years. And we understand the needs of teachers as well as the students that they teach. Randy Solomon, who will be speaking in a little while, he and I were both park rangers with the National Park Service. So our backgrounds are very similar, and we have personal interests that allow us to easily work together. We've been friends for years, and whenever something that comes up across my table is, or on my computer that I think, oh, John, I have to contact John. He would be great. I want to run a couple of ideas off of him. Or Michael Hines at the Department of Education. We're constantly back and forth with this. This is happening here. How can we make this happen? How can we bring it to New Jersey? When New Jersey's First Lady, Tammy Murphy, decided to focus on environmental issues, she approached both the Department of Ed and the Department of Environmental Protection for advice and assistance. And it was her initiative that led to the inclusion of climate education in today's New Jersey standards. We would love, there's people in my office that would love to have their own interests, the groups that they work for, represented as well, but there's only a limited amount of time that each teacher has to put together lessons across the board for all the students. So it's very important that at least climate change, we were very happy when climate change became part of the standards. And especially since most of the people who were working on this also understood the importance of climate justice as well. So it was common goals and an understanding and communication that existed between these offices that make it easy for us to work together. And we work with other groups as well. There are representatives here on this panel today, not on the panel, but I see pictures of people and names. I've worked with at least more than a dozen of these people over many projects over many years, and love to see them, work with them often, and love to see them whenever I can. Allison is one, Dale Rosalette from New Jersey Audubon, Jeff from Wetlands. All these people are just very open and willing to work with other professionals in the field and with the local groups as well.
Fantastic. Looks like New Jersey is lucky to have this ecosystem of all organizations working together. And I don't know if it is easy to replicate it in other places and in other states. So that was not an easy answer, Mark, but we will try to learn from this experience and see what we can do in other places. Especially I work in India a lot, so hope to replicate this example from New Jersey to at least one state in India, if possible.
Well, there are also other groups within the state. Allison mentioned it earlier, and you have several presenters that are members of the group called ANGIE, the Alliance for New Jersey Environmental Education. I know that Mike Shodroff is a speaker in the next couple of days. Both Mike and I have been past presidents of ANGIE, and so it's a tight-knit group of people that work across New Jersey. Unfortunately, it's not that hard to get from one side to the other. To see these people on a regular basis, probably not as easy in India.
I have a question. I would like to introduce myself.
Yes, please go ahead.
My name is Guracha Mohammed Abdallah. I'm from Kenya. I work with the African Union as a Continental Organizing Committee for Development and Youth Affairs. Also, I'm an ambassador of Sustainable Development Goals and the CEO and founder of Guracha Foundation. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce about Guracha Foundation on what is Guracha Foundation. Guracha Foundation is a non-profit organization that is focusing on sustainable development goals. I think one of my friends there has raised an issue of climate in education. There's a program that I've come with on issues of education, climate in education. I would like to take this idea to you, which I call it my school. A call to action to support students, local communities, and Ministry of Education to geo-reference schools as part of an effort to promote climate change, timely information on school location in Africa. And the introduction of that idea, my school today is called to action aims to support students and local communities to geo-reference their schools and education facilities as part of an effort to promote timely information on school location in Africa. To support the call to action, the UN Sustainable Development Solution Network, SDGs, today is providing an accessible product using open source data to share national population counties within various travelers. So on the issue of the climate education, I think in Kenya have given a concept on starting a project, which I'm calling the reforestation or tree plantings project to regenerate the forest, secure animal species, and reverse the climate change. And I'm going to start those projects in all schools in Kenya, which is all 47 counties. So I want to ask my brother, how do we partner on this, on working for climate change? Because climate change is the most critical thing, or the critical thing nowadays that is our world we are facing. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Racha. I think the question is both for Mark and for John on maybe cross-country collaborations and this importance of data that can be used by different citizens to create local plans. Maybe Mark can go first and then John.
Sure. I'm just making sure I'm not muted. I'm not. Thank you for asking an extremely complex series of questions that would probably take hours and hours and weeks of collaborative effort to assist you greatly with. But I can say, at least from my department's point of view, we have a lot. There's a lot of cultural differences between where you come from and here. And there are probably some similarities that we don't even know about. Reforestation obviously is something that we can all deal with. We have issues here in the state of New Jersey. 1/5 of our state is actually protected. Because we have something called the Pinelands, or an old term for it, the Pine Barrens. But it's important to make sure that the forest itself has a critical economic value, and not its woods, not the wood that we get from it, but so many other things that a single individual tree does for us. There was a conference last week that spoke about the difference between old growth and new growth forests and the amount of carbon dioxide that they can sequester. And the forestry industry speaks about how a new growth forest does far more for carbon sequestration than old growth does. But that is because there are so many more acres of new growth forest than old growth. They didn't mention that per tree, an old tree does far more than a sapling can ever do. So there are some issues that we can relate to very easily. I would recommend further communication between us. I can show you examples of what DEP has done within the state of New Jersey. I can show you examples of what the DOE has done, and encourage you to please make contact with us, because this is not something that we can solve in 20 minutes.
Thank you, Mark. John?
So Allison Mulch is on this, and Eco Schools has a sister school program. It's run by the National Wildlife Federation, also run by New Jersey Audubon in this state, that I actually participated in. And I had the opportunity to travel to Taiwan several years ago to learn about what they were doing. So we're speaking of cross-cultural. And so I would suggest that is to look at if that's a possibility, to look to somehow be part of that sister school program, so we can get the schools starting to talk at that level. But this is also a top-down, bottom-up, right? And look at what's going. We're talking about policy, which is at the top level, but we're also talking about the school level and what they could do and learn about each other. And so climate change education right now with the standards it's an interdisciplinary. It has multiple content areas. It's not specific to one thing. It's not specific to science or any other topic like that. So it's good to learn it from really a well-rounded. I'm certainly willing to, and I'm sure others on this call today are willing to offline have some virtual or video conferences to talk and see how some things can get started. You know, obviously we have our hands full in New Jersey and everybody has lots going on, but I think the climate change is a global situation. And it's really interesting to see that, you know, we all have different problems, but in a way there are lots of similarities. So I personally really have interest in other cultures to see what they're doing and what could be done and what we can learn from each other. So I think it was a really good question that was posed. It's now just trying to find a time and the resources to try to figure out how we can collaborate.
Thank you, John. 2 questions since we have you. In the chat, Ben has written, have any schools or school districts committed to going carbon neutral by a specific date? And then there is this question on, could you comment on K-12 climate action plan that was put out by the Aspen Institute? John?
For the second question, no, don't know much about that. I've just learned about it just recently, so I don't have a really deep understanding of that yet. To the first question is, I am not aware of that any K-12 schools in New Jersey have actually committed to carbon neutral by any specific date. Now, we have Sustainable Jersey for Schools, we have Eco Schools, we have Green Ribbon School, we have lots of programs that are working towards mitigation and sustainability and offsetting climate, things like that. But those are great tools in the state, but I have not seen anybody commit to a carbon neutral. It's reduction, it's conservation, it's actions in multiple. If you look at Sustainable Jersey for Schools, there's a whole suite of actions that is moving towards that. But so it's just not just about carbon neutral, it's about all these other actions that you can do, even in health and wellness and, you know, things like that. So not that I'm aware of.
Thank you, John. Mark?
I'd have to agree with John in that respect. I am not familiar with schools that have stated right out that they are going to go carbon neutral, but the Sustainable Jersey program for schools, as well as the Green Ribbon School program, as John said, and as Randy can speak about when he speaks about Sustainable Jersey, there are suggestions and loads of other things that schools can do to be more environmentally friendly. I want to address the question, John and I were both made aware of the Aspen Institute's program recently. I have read the document and read the supporting documents that they have, and I am delighted that they produced this. It does put New Jersey in a great light because it does reference the fact that we are already doing so much. It makes us look great. And it also happens to mimic a lot of what, as John was talking about, the thought leadership document. There's a lot of similarities there between what Aspen Institute did and what we here in New Jersey have done. And there's also similarities in the plans that the Department of Environmental Protection has put out in their recent climate change documents. So there are people who are familiar and worked with both of us. So I know that Frank Neipold is on this call, and he was involved with both the Thought Leadership Group, I believe, and with the Aspen Institute.
Thank you, Mark, for the background and the information. Rose?
And I highly recommend going and reading the document. It's I've already linked our DEP website resources to it. So if you go to the DEP's list of climate change actions and resources, it's already there.
Mark, that's a good point. I did take a look at it. I didn't do a deeper dive like you did, but it does look really good. And I recommend reading it. So it does have some similarities to the guidance document that we are about to put out next week that the Thought Leader Committee on Climate Change Education that we were part of course, and I co-chaired the committee along with Randy Solomon, and we had a lot of great people on there. And I'm not going to do a deeper dive in this, and maybe Randy will probably touch upon it later on, and I don't have that much time to go into it, but the guidance document really identified overarching goals. And then what it also did is identified some really time-sensitive needs in the state. And then there was 4 areas of key needs, you know, in curriculum, professional development, and things like that, and a board leadership component. So everybody will get a copy of this in the state of New Jersey very soon once it's released. We obviously, since it's school boards in sustainable Jersey, we're going to have a press conference on that. And then once that happens, everybody can take a look at the document. But it was done originally to really kind of provide some guidance at every level in a school district, but it does match quite a bit to, Mark, what you're saying at the Aspens, because when I was looking at it, I was like, wow, this is really a great document too. So, yeah.
As I said, makes us look even better.
Yes, it does. Thanks, Mark.
Looking forward to reading the thought document, John, that you mentioned. By next week, we'll be happy to share with the 300 plus participants that are here registered the document so that we can all reflect on it and see what we can do in our local towns and in our communities. I know Frank here has been involved with the K-12 Climate Action Plan. Thanks, Frank, for sending the link here. We'll definitely look at that. A lot of great information. And Mark, please refer to all these links on our chat. Mark listed out lots of amazing resources here. I will save this chat and we will send out all the links as well. But please go through the chat. I think it's a plethora of resources that we can take on and work in our towns and districts. Rosie, I know you have some questions also. Maybe we'll ask you to ask the questions. You are on mute.
Oh, yes. Sorry. So I was reading about how there's a lot of plastic pollution, like runoff from like the New York. How is education and about waste regulation integrated into schools and the state standards?
As I stated earlier, the state standards include environmental issues and impacts, and the impacts of plastic is something we cannot ignore. The state has passed a law, which I included in the links, putting a ban on single-use carry-out bags, polystyrene, foam food service products, and of course, plastic straws, now by request only. I was at a restaurant last night for my daughter's birthday, and they gave straws to everybody, and I handed them back and said, I'll ask for that if I want one. And that's to go into effect this year. I've added the plastic ban and the single-use bags websites to the chat as well. And to coincide with these new requirements, the DEP is working on lesson plans and curriculum supplements to support the legislative actions. One of these supplements is already online. It's called Here Today, Here Tomorrow Recycled. And it's on our education website called Seeds. I put the link in as well. And it can be found online, and there are suggested lesson plans that are correlated to the standards already there. There are actions that people can take, as well as the contact information for every county's recycling coordinators. I also added my own contact information there and a few other links to the chat, and I welcome any questions you may have in the future through my website, through the website, or through the email. And also we do, the department does outreach, and we go to schools, we go to community groups. We're willing to talk about anything environmental. As long as it's a good number of people, it's kind of not environmentally friendly to have to drive for a half hour to speak to 6 people. But if you have an audience, a big classroom or large group audience, we'd be delighted to be involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Rosie, any questions left for John? I know you prepared some, or should I ask my question? You're on mute.
Oh, no. That was all. I'm sorry. The audio is weird.
Okay, great. So I think what we've heard so far is that we need to be working together. We need to be inclusive. We need to learn from each other. We need to take this discussion forward in schools, helping the school principals, helping the communities. But it's also very overwhelming because there are so many different strands and there are so many different things that you can do to do waste reduction, to think about science, to think about social science, integrate everything. Is there a easy 5-step thing that we can do as community members, as green team people, with the help of the boards and with the help of the teachers? Anything that you suggest are like low-lying fruits? I know there might be none because there's no one single pathway, but maybe things that you have seen that has happened, that you can give some examples on that could that have had an impact quickly. So that's my question, and I think Dave has a hands up. Dave, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, you were looking for low hanging fruit. Well, this is fruit that's going to drop on April 22nd, which is Earth Day. It's the Green Actioneers Family Action Guide. It's not a classroom book. It's a book that's going to be distributed the way that scholastic books are distributed. In other words, families come to school in the evening, the kids and parents start going through the book together. And the book includes a coloring book feature for the little guys. It's got quotations from famous people about the environment. You might think of it like Drawdown for Families. It's over 100 things that families can do to go green. Some are small steps, some are free, some are expensive. But the kids are going to get behind this because the book is for the kids and the parents. It happens to be in English and Spanish. And there are puzzles and games on every page. So the kids are going to get entranced by the story in the book because it's a story about 4 families going green, very diverse. And then every family will get a copy of the book when they leave family night, and they'll get to start working on going green. Now, this is not the solution to everything. This is just a way to get elementary and middle school kids conscious of the fact that they need to go green. Incidentally, we don't mention climate change, global warming, or sea level rise in the book because the book is ecumenical. It doesn't matter what your political party is or what your belief system is, this book works for your family. So it's going to launch on April 22nd, and we want to start schools all over the country. I'd love to start a school or 2 in New Jersey on April 22nd. So I'll put my information in the chat and information about the book. And if anybody wants to get their families started, this is really a PTA or green team project.
I have a
Here in
recommendation
Florida,
for you then.
Yeah, sorry?
Dave, you had actually sent me a little preview of it, and I looked at what you had. I thought it was very impressive. Unfortunately, as I think I pointed out to you, I'm a DEP employee, so I can't do any favoritism or
Right.
promote anything. But I would recommend that you attend next year's New Jersey annual ANJEE conference and show the audience this, because they would get a lot out of it, and so would you.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, it's really a PTA project as much as anything else.
Thank you, Dave.
So I have a
Impressive.
couple of comments if I could as well. So I want to reference in terms of everybody has an entry point with school, right? And just a quick story, and not too long. But when I first came to School Boards Association, I was doing presentations and I was talking about climate change, and the board members were like, yeah, that's great, but there was a lot of debate. And so what we did is we had to change the narrative, and I changed the narrative, healthier schools at lower operating costs. And so for board members, now remember, this is what the gentleman just presented, that was a book, that's in the classroom, but also has to be approved by the Board of Ed to actually be used in the school. So we were kind of coming in at this level that the board members had to make decisions, and they were really interested about saving money when we talk about climate, like sustainability and conservation and how much, and then that money could be redirected to a school improvement. Now the narrative is a little bit different, but we still have to face how our Board of Eds and schools are going to be dealing with climate change education now that the standards are are kicked in. I did reference before, and I know Randy's probably going to talk about a little bit more. Randy Solomon, report on K-12 climate change education needs in New Jersey. That document was created as a guidance document for schools to take a look at. There is currently and has been Sustainable Jersey for Schools, Sustainable Jersey, Eco Schools, Green Ribbon School. These are programs and action and certification programs that have been in there to be used by our state. All schools can opt in for that. So these are some of the things that you can kind of hit the ground running. It gives you guidance on how to create a green team and things like that. There's things on policy. We have the tools right now. You just have to opt in to get them. And I know
DEP
Randy had
also, sorry.
No, go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
DEP also offers professional development for teachers. We have a series of activities that teachers will review with the teachers that are climate change lessons, and you get the lessons. You can use them in the classroom. One of the ones is called Climate, Water, and Resilience by Project WET. But we're working right now on putting together documents and PowerPoints that are for the non-science teachers, so that we can make that the climate issues as understandable as possible for them to teach to the students that they have.
Thank you, Mark. Randy has a comment or a question from Sustainable Jersey. By the way, I find your resources very, very helpful, Randy. So if you can tell us how do we all access it, and maybe if there are other countries here, they could also learn from your resources. Oh, I don't see.
I realized I was muted. Sorry about that. It's not like I've not done this before. So yeah, I'm Randy Solomon, and I'm the director of Sustainable Jersey. And we've got two programs that provide kind of a roadmap for communities and for schools on how to address a broad range of sustainability issues with a big focus on climate. And so we have got kind of the very specific policies and programs and actions that you can take to have a big impact on these issues. And so I'm going to talk about this more in the session that's about to follow this. So I'm not going to go too much into depth, but I'll do it then. But just in case anyone's not going to be on that session, I just wanted people to know that. And again, so the stuff we have is very kind of New Jersey vetted and tested, and very specific and concrete. There are things that people in New Jersey can do and have done, and that we really encourage everyone to do. And they're typically not things that you do in your home. They're things that you do in groups. They're things that you do as a school, or as a group of students working with a group of teachers, or in your community working with your local government. But teachers and school administrators and students in particular can have a big impact on whether or not these actions get taken. So more later.
Thank you so much, Randy, for your comment. And of course, we'll hear from you in the following session. We have 2 minutes left, and I wanted to give it to Mark and John, one minute each, on just the vision going forward. What do you need from people like us? What is it that the schools need support on, and what do we want to do going forward?
Mark, you want to go first?
Repeat those again.
So the communities in general, where is climate education going? What will you require from the communities? What do schools need to do so that we have a vision of for the next year, at least 2022-23?
Teachers have, I've heard from many teachers that have said that they are very willing and open to teaching about climate change. They are unfamiliar with the issues if they're not science teachers, and they don't know what resources are best. So what we're trying to do is, what we're trying to do is provide data that supports their needs. So the thing that I would say is the most important thing to do is let us know what you need, because we can gear what we can do to what people want, to what people are looking for. The standards are there. So we want to help. And you've probably heard that before. And, I'm from the government and I want to help.
So school boards can help. move this forward by, and I mentioned it earlier, through policy, writing policy, adopting ours, or at least looking at ours and using it as a model, and then creating what they have based on their individual culture of that particular school. They can set board goals. There's really three overarching big goals or things that school boards can do: policy, board goals, and put it in their strategic plan. Some schools have 3 years, some schools have 5 years. That's one thing, because then it becomes part of the culture of the school. And then, you know, once they set those goals, then it's up to the school to figure out how to actually work that plan out. I think teachers need a lot more education about climate change, you know, the difference between weather and climate, things like that. So the needs document that's going to be released next week, we have outlined some of those things, so overarching goals. You know, things like that are really important. The Board of Ed actually communicates with the public. So the public is going to come in, they're going to be, well, what's this climate change thing? And so the Board of Eds need some information and training about how to actually respond to the public as they come in and asking these big questions. Because some parents are concerned, some people don't believe in climate change, and there might be some of that. And so how do we educate our board members from School Boards Association, along with others that we will probably be doing professional development on in the next months, then coming months. I don't know, we're out of time, so.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Mark. I think this has been super inspirational, and there is lots going on. What I realize is that we need to catch up on a lot of links and a lot of reading to do. And there are resources out there. There are tools out there that we can all use. So thank you for this very informative session. I really appreciate your time, and we will be sure to share all the links and the video recording in our YouTube channel and across different listservs that we have. So thank you so much for your time and for your intervention here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Going over to our next panel, which talks about localization of sustainable development goals in education and in local communities and how to take action on them. Handing over to my colleague Jasmine and Alok. Jasmine.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm about to introduce our first speaker, which is Alain Lynch. She's a senior research manager at the Sustainable Development Solution Network, where she considers the question, what will it take to achieve the SDGs in the United States? She's also the author of several reports analyzing US progress towards the SDGs, including how equitably the US delivers the SDGs to different racial communities. Her research interests also include understanding how poverty and inequality become entrenched in social system and how to prevent harm when designing policy and programs. Alaina, are you there?
Hi, yes, thank you so much.
Should I get?
Okay,
yes,
thank
go
you.
ahead with your presentation. Thank
Okay.
you.
I'm gonna take a minute just to share my screen with you all. I'm wondering if you can see this okay? Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here, and I'm really happy to be in conversation with you all. Like I was introduced, my name is Alain Lynch. I'm a senior research manager at SDSN, and I'm here to talk about our 2021 U.S. State Sustainable Development Report in general, and then specifically what we found out about New Jersey through this work. The framework that we used to do this work is the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So the Sustainable Development Goals were decided in 2015 and meant to be achieved by 2030. We use these as a framework for a few reasons. One, because they're the only set of goals that are universally decided on by all 193 member countries. So this is the only set of goals that collectively we've agreed to meet. And the other reason that we use them is because they capture information that look at sustainability from many different lenses. So we have an environmental, an economic, and a social lens. So you can see that some of the goals here are no poverty, zero hunger, but also reduce inequalities, gender equality, peace, justice, and strong institutions, as well as things like climate action, life below water, and life on land. Here is a picture of just how interlinked the SDGs are with each other. So this is an example from Goal 10, and it shows how the different targets in Goal 10 relate to targets across the other SDGs. This is important because what it does is help us create a framework where we can look at the intersections of these issues, and also it can help us address the structural issues that cause that we have to face when we're looking at sustainability. So if we're working on a water project, for example, how does that interact with good jobs? How do the people who are working on getting clean water to our community have good jobs? And how are we making sure that those good jobs are going to all communities, especially to those communities who have been left out of economic progress? So this is why we think it's a useful framework. Their SDSN is actually a network of networks. There are over 40 networks of researchers, educators, think tanks, academics across the globe that work to find solutions for the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm on the team that does research at SDSN, and we produce a variety of reports looking at how well different regions, nations, subnational regions are doing on the SDGs. This methodology that we use has been audited by the JRC, which is the gold standard in index methodology, as well as in peer-reviewed publications. And so we use this methodology across our reports, which allows us to interlink and connect them across contexts. In the US specifically, we've done reports at the city level, at the state level, like the one I'm going to talk about in New Jersey in this presentation. And also we've looked at racially disaggregated data. So how differently does the US deliver sustainable development across racial communities in the US? So what do we find? Here is a map of our 2021 state scores. The range here goes from red to green. You'll notice there aren't any green states. This is because there aren't any states that are actually on track to achieve the SDGs yet in the United States. Here are the 2021 state rankings. You'll see that Vermont tops the rankings and Mississippi is at the bottom. Even the best states, Vermont and Massachusetts at the top, are only 2/3 of the way to achieving the SDGs. And Mississippi and West Virginia at the very bottom are, 1/3 of the way. So there's still quite a bit of progress to do on achieving sustainable development in the US. You'll also see a trend column with orange arrows all pointing to the right. That we use to indicate that there's not a lot of progress happening. That there's a lot of work to be done and we're not moving fast enough to achieve these SDGs by 2030. New Jersey, the reason that brings us all together here today, New Jersey is 14th and has a score of 52.4 out of 100. So a little bit more than halfway of the way to achieving the SDGs in New Jersey. How do we determine these results? How do we know that this is the case? In 2021, we used 103 indicators across 50 states and 15 of the 17 goal areas. We then translated all the values or the scores from these indicators to a 0 to 100 score. Then we averaged these scores together at the goal level, and then we averaged the goals together to get our overall score. We also collected, we also created a linear average growth for the period that was closest to 2015 to 2020 to help us predict by 2030, are we moving fast enough to actually achieve the SDGs? What dates are included in this report? And this is important to think about. The most recent date for most of our indicators, most of the 103 that are included, is 2019. So the period that we're really talking about here is the pre-pandemic period. And just wanted to take a moment to share the types of icons that we're using throughout this presentation and what they really mean. And so what we're looking for, the green, and what is not so great is the red. That's a little bit more detail is shown here. Okay, so the overall results. As you probably intuited when you saw the overall map at the beginning, there are lots of differentiation by region. So the West South Central and the East South Central region are doing less well than the New England Pacific regions. Overall, states improved an average of 1.5 points per year on the SDGs. This is, we'd have to improve scores by about 5 times in order to achieve the SDGs. So this is really slow. You'll see on the right a dashboard that organizes state scores by goal. And you'll see that in goals 1, no poverty, 10, end inequality, and 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. Those are a little bit more, red flaming columns. And those are the goals where generally US states are doing less well. Unfortunately, states are going backwards on at least 20% of indicators for in every state. So some states are going backwards more than that, but at least for 20% of indicators in every single state are actually going in the wrong direction. So this should give us pause as we think about how we're going to plan and what type of action we need for the next 9 years. Quick summary, if we were to think of the indicator scores as grades, about 2/3 of them would be Fs. So, this is kind of should give us all a little bit of pause. On the bright side, there are some As out there. Some states are doing 90s or more, so something to be proud of as well. Summarized by indicator, if we look at progress, about 1/5 or 22% of states are on track at the indicator level, but unfortunately 1/3 are actually going in the wrong direction. And just a few more points before I get to New Jersey in specific, change in goal score. If we look at the period 2015 to 2020, and this is coming before the pandemic, we'll see that actually in goal 3, which is good health and well-being, US states were declining in their progress already before we hit the pandemic. So we have to think about what infrastructure and processes and structures were in place that maybe were already weakened before this massive health crisis. And the last part is the Leave No One Behind sub-index. The Leave No One Behind is the first agenda of the SDGs, and in my opinion, one of the most important pieces of it. The Leave No One Behind agenda says that those who have been least served by development progress deserve to have development delivered to them first in the delivery of the SDGs. We use 22 indicators to disaggregate progress by poverty, racial identity, age, geography, etc., to see if states were really targeting and making sure that those who had been left behind were being served first. What we found was that states are only half of the way to delivering the SDGs to the communities least served. Vermont and Hawaii are at the best, but they're still only half the way there. And Oklahoma and Mississippi are lagging behind at only a quarter of the way there. Okay, so New Jersey in specific, what do we know about New Jersey? Here is a snapshot of New Jersey at a glance. I mean, this is important to think about. This is the state averages, what we're looking at, and we're looking at information that can be compared across states. So this sets a context for if we wanted to compare New Jersey to other states in the US, and if we wanted to compare it at specifically the state level, this is the information we would use. So we see that New Jersey is 14th, so pretty good, near the top, halfway to the way to achievement. Leave No One Behind score about 1/3 of the way there. We'll see that there's not a lot of red, there's also no green. And in goal 3, like many states across the US, New Jersey is getting worse in health scores. Okay, and a little more detail. So I just put a small selection of indicators that are doing the best in New Jersey at the state level. So New Jersey is part of the Climate Alliance. So we consider that as, a signal that New Jersey is interested in addressing climate change. Has a family leave policy. Lead emissions and SO2 emissions are actually some of the best in the country in New Jersey. New Jersey has very few LGBTQ hate crimes relative to other states. And there are also some good 4-year high school graduation rates and bachelor degree. Oops, too fast. Sorry about that. Okay, the worst performing indicators in New Jersey at the state level. And this is where we get into some of the tricky pieces of sustainable development. We see that things that aren't going so well in New Jersey are, for example, the gender and race wage gap, racial disparity in homelessness, water pollution, racial disparity in school suspensions and expulsions. And one of the things that comes up, and when we're starting to look at the worst indicators in New Jersey, is that state averages and averages in general can obscure inequalities. And so when we start digging into disaggregated data, either by gender or race or class, disability, all of these protected or identity issues, we start to see that there's actually some nuance in what is going on. And we see that there's actually some issues that are worth addressing. If we look at how equally New Jersey delivers the SDGs across racial groups, we see that New Jersey particularly struggles to deliver the SDGs equitably in poverty, healthcare, gender equality, good jobs, justice and strong institutions. And it's important to think about this, even if you might be saying to yourself right now, well, actually, I'm just a biodiversity expert. Racial inequality is not super relevant to how I'm thinking about these things. But actually, the way that we are going to move forward on sustainable development is by connecting all of these things to each other. So the risk would be that we try to move forward on biodiversity while ignoring racial inequality, and then just reinvent the wheel, reinvent status quo in a new way. And if we do that, we risk actually never achieving sustainable development, because sustainable development actually includes all of these other elements. And so this is why looking at this disaggregated data, either by race or by other disaggregations, is an essential part of all of our work, regardless of the topic area. So there is more good news. There are some New Jersey indicators that are on track for achievement by 2030. Bachelor's degrees, research and development expenditure, fatal occupation injuries. These are places where New Jersey is excelling and can perhaps share best practices with other places around the country, and is worth celebrating. There are also places where indicators are getting worse in New Jersey. Some of these are reading achievement and water pollution, life expectancy. Unfortunately, life expectancy across the country is getting worse, and after the pandemic, that has only gotten more dire. One more way to think about New Jersey in a comparative way before I pause to take any questions, comments, or further the discussion. In comparison to other states, New Jersey does better than most states in eviction rates. SO2 per capita, so that's air pollution, deaths by suicide, and preschool enrollment. So these are places where New Jersey is excelling. New Jersey does worse than most states in renewable consumption and gender and race wage gaps. So these are places where New Jersey might benefit from reaching out to other places and other states to find best practices. Okay, so there's lots that we couldn't say. This is a national level examination of sustainable development. So we're looking at specifically things we have data for across all states. And some things we can't talk about are, is there lead in water? How many people experience intimate partner violence? What are the adult literacy rates? Is there accessible and affordable public transportation? However, these are things that you might be able to know or dig into at the more local level. And so one of the opportunities of a project like this is that at the more local level in your community, or even at the state level where you have access to more detailed data, starting to fill in these gaps specifically for New Jersey and thinking about, okay, here's this greater context and how it relates to all these other states and how it relates to other countries, but what detailed data can we use to fill in from the ground up? The other data gaps are, of course, across disaggregation across multiple identities. So like I mentioned, you could disaggregate this by ability or gender, for example, and that would probably give us more nuanced understandings of where successes are happening and where there's room to grow. If you are interested in delving into these 103 indicators in more detail, or figuring out how New Jersey compares to other states on different topics, you can play around with the data at this website here. I'll also put it into the link after I'm done talking. And then there's this other one that also lets you look at how New Jersey is delivering the SDGs differently across racial groups, and could also be useful context for work that you might be doing. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you all, and I look forward to talking with you more.
Thank you so much, Elena. Ishmael has a very interesting question saying, how is the collaboration between states in the US can help poor countries support the implementation of SDGs? If you can give us your thoughts on that.
Oh, sorry, can you say that one more time? How can collaboration between states
support poor countries in their implementation of SDGs?
Yeah, absolutely. So, actually, the first thing I thought of is the other way around. The US in very rural areas has taken public health initiatives from poor countries and applied that to help think about how to apply, how to make sure that people have access to healthcare in very dispersed areas. So there's lots of like bilateral and bidirectional exchange that can happen. I think there are also places where the US has excelled, where it has found ways to do things well. And so these best practices could be shared. And I think that's one of the benefits of the Sustainable Development Goals. It gives us this shared language, this shared framework to be able to then say, we know that in, for example, Uganda, they're thinking about goal 3. What have we learned about goal 3 that we might exchange with them? And what can they teach us about goal 3 that we can apply here? So it gives us automatically this shared language that can be used almost nearly universally, because all 193 countries have officially at least signed on to work on this.
Exactly. I know Aluk has 2 questions for you as well. Aluk, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Thank you, Ms. Mora. And first, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Aluk Bhatt, and I'm a senior at Milburn High School in New Jersey. For the last 3 years, I've been an eco-ambassador for the Center for Sustainable Development, CSD, at the Earth Institute at Columbia University. I work to raise awareness in my community about plastic waste, reducing meat consumption, and avoiding the use of toxic pesticides. My project on using cardboard to control weeds won first place in the STEAM Month challenge in my school district. And so, Ms. Lynch, I have 2 questions for you. Last September, our town Milburn was badly affected by Hurricane Ida. A lot of downtown businesses were gutted, and a lot of families lost their belongings as their homes were flooded. Can you tell us more about New Jersey's climate change resilience strategy and how this plan can be localized in different communities across the state?
Sure, yeah, so I don't want to speak in great detail about the resilience strategy because I didn't build it and I wasn't part of those negotiations, but I do want to say that, one of the benefits of localization or of any of these project sustainability is that it's really as much a ground up issue as it is a top down issue. And I think that's one of the really incredible opportunities is the SDGs give us this language and this, framework, this toolbox to start saying, actually, this is what we want for our communities. And this is how we think it's best to deliver it. And so I think whatever the community challenges are in that community, I hope that the SDGs can offer some sort of a tool or a lens to start saying like, yes, we want climate resilience. And how do we then incorporate into climate resilience goal 2, hunger? How did this impact hunger when this happened in our community? And can we think about that as we're finding solutions? Can we also think about what that meant for clean water when everything was flooding, or the sanitation work? And so I think perhaps this is not exactly the answer to your question, but perhaps this can be a tool or a way of thinking about this as communities do start to ask for things that they need or create solutions for themselves.
Yeah, I like your point about like how everything is like very interconnected, like sanitation, as well as cleanliness, food security, and all that. My next question for you is priority number 4 in the state resilience plan talks about investing in information and increasing public understanding so that communities can be more resilient and better prepared for climate change-induced phenomena. Can you talk about what is done to promote this awareness and how local community members can get involved in this initiative?
Sure, yeah. So again, I'm not part of the New Jersey effort, so I don't want to speak to exactly what is being done in New Jersey, but I do want to speak to what's being done generally around sustainable development, and maybe there's some parallels there. So, the SDGs have some, I would say, not super big uptake in the US so far, but where it has been taken up is at the city level, at the county level, by communities. There's an organization, UNA USA, that organizes students and local communities around developing their own goals for the SDGs. And so I think developing a shared language, whether it be the SDGs or something else, is an important intermediate step in being able to actually take action. So if we can all be at the same table and understand what we're all talking about, if we have a shared understanding of these topics in a general way, if you are a food insecurity expert, you're never probably going to be a clean energy expert, and that's okay. That's the beauty of this being interdisciplinary and collaborative and community effort. But can you bring what you do have and talk about it in a common enough way that people can tap into that and speak to each other and work collaboratively?
Perfect. Yes.
We have a question from Randy, if we want to let him jump in and ask his question.
I was about to introduce him so he can
start. Oh, okay. Perfect.
So if he's already added so much to the conversation, but I'm introducing Randall Solomon. He's the director of the Sustainability Institute at the College of New Jersey and the executive director of Sustainable Jersey. I'm just gonna let you jump into it, Randall.
Okay. So I do have a presentation, but Alok, your questions are really good, and I am kind of the New Jersey version of Elena, so I think I can give you some of the very New Jersey specific questions, answers to your questions. And so before I give you like my prepared presentation, I think I'll just address some of those. So on resilience, with New Jersey, the New Jersey State Legislature did pass a law that says every city and town in New Jersey has to do a climate resilience plan and then integrate that into their formal master plans. But they haven't put out very clear guidance yet on what that means. And so most cities and towns don't really know what to do. And so my organization is working with the state, with the DEP and some others to sort of come up with the detailed guidance on how to actually go about creating that plan. But in the short term, on the Sustainable Jersey website, and I'll show that in a minute, there is a very specific resource and set of actions that can lead you through a process, not the official one that's coming from the state, but one that I think will look very similar to it, that starts off with identifying what your assets are in the community that you care about, your commercial district, vulnerable populations, emergency response assets, hospitals, whatever it may be, and then seeing what those specific assets are under threat from, by looking at actual maps of where water is projected to be in the future with climate change, both from coastal flooding as well as sort of these new massive rainstorms that we're getting, and then see what parts of the community are going to get flooded as a first step to sort of then saying, okay, what are we going to do about it? And the floods that we have now are, in theory, just the beginning. It's going to get worse, and more things are going to get flooded more frequently. So you sort of overlay these maps, and then you start to go asset by asset and say, how are we going to make these things safer? What things are we going to move? What flood control projects do we need? But you're also supposed to look at things like the urban heat island effect. So urban areas get hotter when it gets hot than rural areas because there's more asphalt and pavement that's absorbing all that heat, and there's less tree cover, and infectious diseases and a number of other factors are going to be hitting. So it's looking at all of these factors. So that's on the Sustainable Jersey website. And then also there's an action that's dealing with emergency communications, which is really important because every municipality is a front line, every city and town is a frontline implementer of communication to the people about evacuations, about where to go if the power goes out, or if you do have a heat wave and then the power goes out and you're literally dying in your home, where can you go to get help? And one of the real problems is that most communities are pretty good at communicating to people who are hooked into the internet in English. But what if you don't have reliable internet at home? What if you don't speak English? What if an evacuation notice goes out, but you don't have the means to evacuate because you don't have a car, or you don't have family, or you don't have a second house, or whatever? So it walks you through a process of really trying to think through who are those vulnerable people in your community, how do you communicate with them, and how are you going to help them in an emergency? And that's also on Sustainable Jersey. So without further ado, I will now revert to talking about what I originally came here to talk about. And I'm going to talk about two things. One, I'm going to show the New Jersey version of what Elena just showed you. So it's a series of goals that we created for New Jersey, and then a process to sort of track our progress. And then I'm going to switch and I'm going to talk about what you can actually do, because Sustainable Jersey is more than just kind of like tracking progress towards goals and sort of judging that, but it is a framework for action at the local level and to bring people together at the local level and then feed you resources and guidance and listen to you to sort of hear what you need and then come back with the stuff that you need to help everyone in schools and communities around New Jersey take action. And if we're all taking action, then to try to have that action have a rise up and have a statewide and global impact. So part one, and let me share my screen. The Sustainable State of the State report. So we at Sustainable Jersey periodically release this report that is saying what is the state of New Jersey as it relates to sustainability. And we only release it every few years because frankly, most of the trends that we track don't change that often. So it would be pretty boring to see these little indicators move a tiny bit every year. But it's a really interesting report. It has, we've got essentially a number of different goals, which are very similar to the Global Sustainable Development Goals, but slightly different, that were created by a panel of experts and stakeholders here in New Jersey to identify the issues that we really care about locally and that we want to track. And then for each one of those, this is kind of a summary of it. We track how we're doing. We give it a thumbs up, we give it a thumbs down, or we have a little magnifying glass saying we're not really sure what the trend is, the data is unclear. And then if there's an equity issue, we have these little scales of justice. So you can see the ones that relate to equity. And if that action is related, if that issue is related to climate, there's a climate one. And so you can see we've got it for biodiversity and ecosystems, water, agriculture, air, health, education and human development, social capital, governance, economy, housing, transportation, development patterns, energy, and waste. And then we have a little summary at the report where we show for each one, we give a little synopsis of how we're doing. And then you can go deeper into the report and you can look at each one. So here's biodiversity. And for each one of those, we give kind of like the thumbnail description of what's going on. So like bird species diversity. 5 out of 6 species of indicator birds representing different New Jersey habitats and regions are declining. So, and then we list the actual bird species that are declining and which ones that aren't. And so you can go through this entire report and really get a sense of how we're doing. It's fascinating. And then as you can see, there's a lot of thumbs down and not a lot of thumbs up, but there are some in fact bright spots. And then if you're interested, you can also dig in to the actual data. So, we've got this technical report and shows here's all the bird species. And so we can see populations of red knots in New Jersey starting in 1981. And these are really fascinating birds because they migrate from South America. And so they're susceptible to habitat degradation, not just in New Jersey, but all along the way. And you can see their populations have really been struggling. So, and then finally, I want to show kind of this report, which is a summary that we did, and I'll just give you the highlights of these actual trends in New Jersey. And we did this 2 years ago, summarizing the previous 10 years of trends. And so on energy, we are making progress towards lowering our greenhouse gas emissions, but not surprisingly, we're not making change fast enough. I won't talk too much about that because that's a huge topic and we could talk forever about that. Ecosystems development. So the amount of land in New Jersey that's been developed has been steadily increasing. And we've actually gotten to the point that almost all the land in New Jersey that's not preserved has been built on. On water, the ability of our lakes, rivers, and streams to support essential services like swimming and fishing and recreation and drinking has declined significantly. And we're at the point where, actually, let me zoom in on this a little bit. I'm not sure if you can read it, but I will zoom in so you can. Just for example, just under a fourth of the state's water bodies were found to fully support safe recreation, and fewer than 0.5% were found to be safe for fish consumption because of pollution. And but on the positive side, our drinking water is very safe. However, not all of the chemicals that we're concerned about right now are being tested, and every year we produce more and more chemicals that are released sort of into the world. On housing, over the past decade, the percentage of people who spend 30% or more of their income on housing, which is a critical benchmark for housing affordability, has come down slightly, which is a good thing. Housing is a little bit more affordable, but it still represents 2/5 of the population that is struggling when it comes to housing. Air quality. Air quality has actually improved quite a bit over the past 20, 30 years. It's improved a little bit over the past 10 years, but there's a lot of variability. There's some hot spots, and it has a lot to do with equity, has a lot to do with race, has a lot to do with income, but there are places where air quality is great and air quality is not so good in New Jersey. In terms of waste and recycling, we are in the midst of a massive recycling crisis in this country, and recycling rates have gone way down. Long story, but it's a problem. And then meanwhile, the amount of waste that we produce, whether it's recycled or not, keeps increasing because we are consuming more and more and more. Social well-being. Prior to the pandemic, the rate of violent crime in New Jersey was low and had been going down. But again, there's a lot of local variation. Economy. New Jersey is one of the wealthiest states. However, there's incredible wealth inequality. And then also one thing we noted is that the dynamism of the economy has been decreasing in that there are fewer businesses starting and there are more sort of larger monopolistic businesses that have been able to sort of just take over and sort of crowd out smaller businesses and new businesses. And so while the overall size of the economy has been doing well and the wealth of the state has been doing well, it's not very dynamic and there's not a lot of kind of newness. Education, the percentage of students that are successfully completing high school is high and has been increasing. And there are still significant but decreasing gaps in graduation rates among different racial groups. And then on health, after decades of progress, the rate of preventable premature deaths in New Jersey actually began to reverse. And I think one thing that we all took for granted, my generation, the generation before me, I'm a Gen Xer, for as long as I can remember, is that life expectancy has increased. That has been one of the critical signs of human progress and human development. And prior to the pandemic, this entire report is prior to the pandemic, we actually saw a reversal, an ending and a reversal of that trend for the first time in, human history, give or take. So that is really something to pay attention to. So what can we do about it? What can we do about it? So that's where Sustainable Jersey kind of comes in. And let me go to this. Whoops. I'm going to share a presentation. So Sustainable Jersey is a nonprofit group in New Jersey. Can people see my opening slide? And what we do is we work with schools and we work with cities and towns and the volunteers as well as the governments in those schools and towns to coordinate the priorities. What is it we're trying to achieve, as well as bring resources and identify the specific policies that we want to implement to achieve our goals. So we, working with state, working with the business community, working with nonprofits, local leaders, we say, what is it we really need to achieve? What are the specific actions that we can take at the local level in each community to make a difference? And we try to then provide resources from all these different folks. We develop the tools, the guidance documents, the programs, the policies, the ordinances that tell you exactly what to do to make progress. And then we provide access to grants and technical assistance. And we recognize accomplishments. And I think most people have heard of the Sustainable Jersey certification. Right now in New Jersey, this map shows the number of participating municipalities. So that's cities and towns on the left. And then on the right, the number of schools that are participating. And then the blue dots are the ones that are trying to achieve our certification. And the silver and bronze dots are the ones that actually have achieved our certification at a certain level. And as you can see, strangely enough, almost the entire state has signed on to participate, and a good number are actually starting to achieve meaningful results. One of the reasons this program has been really successful, and I think really it's been copied in about a dozen other states now, is because we have a process, our own process, to identify what it is that we want to do collectively, working from the bottom up and the top down. So we have these task forces of experts and local officials and volunteers and state agencies that come together and on all the different issues that you can think about: recycling and waste, energy, water, animals, equity, you name it, education. We identify the problems and then come up with local solutions. And because all these different sectors of people and from all walks of life are coming together trying to agree on what the solutions are, there's a lot of buy-in, there's a lot of support for implementing those actions. And that's why we were able to get to the point where everyone in the state is sort of doing it. So I won't go into a lot of detail, but you can see, there are a lot of organizations that are participating in the effort to create these actions and to provide resources to help people implement them. We have a kind of a big operation. We do a lot of workshops, webinars, provide technical assistance, a lot of social media. I encourage everyone to sign up for our email list. And then we also give out grants. We've given out actually close to now $7 million since to schools and communities since 2009. Let me kill that and show our website. And then I encourage people to check out our website. There's the school's website at Sustainable Jersey Schools. And then there's a municipal website, sort of the towns and cities website at sustainablejersey.com. And within these websites, you'll see, you can see a map of all the different schools that are participating. And waiting for it to load. The only time of the speed of your computer matters is when you're giving a presentation and waiting for it to load. So you can go onto our map and you can click on any school and then you can view a report and you can see what that school did to get certified. And so you can see that this school, for example, I'll just pick one. These are all the different things that they did. And, just to pick one. So here they did, digital citizenship, and we can actually see, I can download and we can see their digital citizenship sort of program materials. Pretty cool. And then another thing that you can do is from this map, you can search. So you can say, I want to know everybody. I want to know every school. Of course, I'm waiting for the map to load again. Every school in Mercer County that did climate mitigation and renewable energy. So I want to know who did a school carbon footprint. I want to know who's buying renewable energy. I want to know who's got solar and who's got geothermal. And we can look at the whole state. So we'll filter it. And then those are all the schools that have proven to our standards that they've actually done that. And then you can look and see what they actually did. So it's a pretty cool resource. And then most schools in New Jersey are participating. So if you're a student, if you're a teacher, whomever, you can find out who's responsible in your community. You can do that on our website to see who the people are. And then the guts of the program are these actions. And so for each one of these actions, these are the things we want you to do to make a difference. And so here's the school carbon footprint. We want you to actually measure the greenhouse gas emissions that you're producing so that you can reduce it. And for each one of these quote unquote actions, we've got standard information. So who should lead and be involved with it? What's the time frame for implementing it? What does it cost? What kind of resources do you need, including personnel and expertise? Nuts and bolts details of how you do it, step by step by step, and some spotlights. What are some other schools that have done it? So I can sort of talk to them and check it out. So it's a tremendous resource. And then it's sort of a roadmap for action at the local level here in New Jersey. And then finally, the final thing I want to share with you today is the New Jersey Student Climate Challenge, which we are doing in partnership with the First Lady and a few other organizations, the Exelon Foundation, Atlantic City Electric, which is sort of the electric utility in South Jersey, as well as the Drumthwacket Foundation. And this is a challenge to students to take action at the local level. And it's a contest. The students in grades 6 to 12 form teams of 2 to 12 students. They complete a school or a community project that addresses the causes of climate change and trying to address them, and the impacts of climate change. So how do we adapt to it, to prevent flooding or whatever, and then produce a digital story video about your project. It's digital storytelling. So what sets that apart from other videos? There's a personal storytelling aspect that shares with the viewer the narrative behind the video topic. And we connect on an emotional level. We communicate our perspective and perception. And there's usually a collaborative effort of stories, characters, and their actions and their points of views. So we want you to use digital storytelling. The timeline for this challenge is February right now. There's educational sessions that are happening, both for students and for teachers, on how to be involved in this. April 1, the challenge submissions are due. May 1, the finalists are announced. And then in June, at the Governor's Mansion in Drumthwacket, hosted by the Governor and the First Lady, we will have an awards ceremony for the winners. Needless to say, for you students, this would look great on your college applications. There's also a prize that goes to your school, a cash prize for the winners. So upcoming sessions for students. I won't read them all, but just to say there's a lot of cool stuff in here that will give you great ideas on projects and how to take actions. And upcoming professional learning opportunities for teachers, dealing with how to be an effective teacher in teaching climate change and inspiring your students. And there's a lot of resources online. And you can find all of that both on the Sustainable Jersey website or on this link, which I will put into the chat. And there's the QR code if anyone wants to whip out their phone right now. And I'll leave that up there for a couple seconds.
Thank you so much. We'll make sure to send out those links as well. I know Luke has a couple of questions for you. So please, Luke, go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Mora. So I have 2 questions for you. My first question is, can you please give us some examples of how resilience can or is being integrated into local and regional planning? Are there any notable initiatives or projects that you can tell us about?
There are so many. So for one thing, in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy, which I guess funny for me, an old timer to say, is probably a little bit before your time. But New Jersey was really, really hard hit, and especially places along the coast. And so places like, for example, I just remind everyone to please mute yourself if you're not talking, to avoid incidental things like that. So anyway, but places like Jersey City and Hoboken did massive construction projects to create what's called green infrastructure. Green infrastructure is infrastructure that does things like you'd expect roads and pipes to do, but it's green, it's natural. And so using tree plantings and what's called bioswales and other things, they've made it so that the city is these urban places are now more like sponges. And so when all the water hits, they can absorb all the water so that it's not just a massive flood. There have been projects up and down the coast to try to build seawalls to keep things out. Some of those projects are actually fairly misguided because you can't really keep the ocean out. You have to sort of work with it and move along with it. And then there's but I think, having said all that, the major work is still to be done. I would say Hurricane Sandy came, billions of dollars were spent, a lot of hand-wringing happened, time passed. What's changed? Some things have changed, but for the most part, we're still in the same spots as we were. We've raised up all the houses on the shore on stilts, but for the most part, we still have a lot of work to do.
I like the point you brought up about Hoboken and Jersey City's green infrastructure initiatives. I know we could use a lot more of those, especially in Milburn after Ida. Yeah,
I actually understand that Milburn did a big streetscaping project to make it more sort of pedestrian and bicycle friendly. And I think there might have been green infrastructure elements in it as well. And then people hated how it looked, and then it got undone. Is that true?
Yes, that is true.
Okay. Oh, well.
Yeah. And my second question to you is, what are some of the ways in which we can localize the implementation of the SDGs? And what role can community members and elected officials play in this? Also, what role can students play in ensuring not just awareness, but implementation at grassroots levels?
That's a great question. And I think that is the reason why Sustainable Jersey exists. Like, we created our program to provide that detailed roadmap of what you can do. And so the one, students, if if you're in high school, there's most cities and towns in New Jersey have a green team. I know Milburn does. They generally love to hear from students. Why is it that, like, old people in government just melt and go crazy when a student shows up? I don't know, but they do. So work it. Take advantage of that fact. And then the school also participates in the Sustainable Jersey program, and schools are supposed to have green teams as well, a school green team. Now, schools are a little bit more rigid about how students can engage, but nonetheless, most of those actions in Sustainable Jersey for schools require student participation at some level. Some can actually be led by students. Some students can be sort of stakeholders, but in all cases, students can be pains in the butt. Students can raise the issue, students can force the issue, and just kind of bang the drum to try to get action.
I like your point about what you said about the students, because we actually did that in Milburn, where it was an initiative where all the eco ambassadors, people in the environmental green team, the Boy Scouts team, all showed up at the town council meeting like 2 years ago, and you're able to put a ban on single-use plastic bags.
There you go. And you got Sustainable Jersey points in your effort to get certified for that. So awesome.
Thank you so much, Luke. We have another question on the Padlet that it says their question is about water quality, especially in some older cities, including Newark, Trenton, and Camden, where lead levels are in the unhealthy range. What is the state doing to address this health-related issue?
Great. So, we have had lead in our water for those of us who live in older communities for a long time. And it goes, for the most part, it's not entire water systems. For the most part, it's not the lead that's coming from the water company. For the most part, it is the lead that is in the pipes in our homes, or in the pipes what they're called the service lines that run from our homes to the main that is in the middle of the street. And they leach lead little by little, and lead is one of the most, if you wanted to take a group of people and make sure that they were going to be failures in life and it's, their emotional development, intellectual development, and in their success for generations, poison them with lead. That's the thing. It would be a horrible outcome. The lead levels in New Jersey have not really increased. It's that our understanding of what constitutes toxic levels of lead has increased. And so the amount of lead that we consider safe has gone down to the point where more people now are considered unsafe. To make a long story short, New Jersey has announced major funding and a requirement that all of these lead pipes in the service lines that run from the street to your house that have lead get replaced. And over the next probably 10 years, I'm just guessing, because this is not my specific area of expertise, that's probably all going to get done. If you live in an older home, however, you still could have, thanks, Mark. That's perfect. He just put sort of more information in the chat. That doesn't address the existing problem, though, which is if you're in an older home, there's a reasonable chance that you have lead pipes in your house if you haven't replaced it. So you can get that tested. There's places we can get that tested for free, and there's steps that you can take to avoid it. For one thing, the lead if the lead water sits in the pipe for a while, like overnight, it kind of builds up. And then when you first run the water, you'll get like a lead slug that's a higher concentration. But if you just let it run for about 30, 40 seconds, usually you'll bleed it out and then it'll just be clear water. You can also filter your water, but you have to make sure that it's a filter that actually filters lead. So, those are the main things. And, if you can afford it to replace those lead pipes, do it. But for the most part, our water is pretty clean. And so I do not want to discourage people from drinking their tap water. And in many cases, the water that you get out of your tap is certainly more sustainable, certainly better for the environment in terms of its environmental impact to bring it to you than bottled water. And often it's cleaner and healthier because there are higher standards for your local water company, and they're more accountable to us than some water company that's just putting water in a bottle from who knows where and shipping it here.
Thank you so much, Randall. Please make sure to share all those important links so we can send it to everyone, as well as along with the taping of everything, so everybody can keep on connecting and coming up with great ideas. And thank you so much, Alaina, as well, for your great presentation, and I look for your very insightful questions. If anyone has another question for Randall or Alaina, I will take that now, and if not, we can, I guess, move on with the next session. I don't see anything in the Padlet or the chat. Oh, I noticed that, Allison, you put all the links on the Padlet as well. So please make sure to check the Padlet as well, not just to add questions, but also to see all the important links that everybody's been sharing. Thank you so much. Radhika, would you like to move on to the next session?
Thank you, Jasmine and Alok. Fascinating presentation, fascinating panel. Moving on to, which is a nice segue from hearing about indicators and data to storytelling. What do these indicators say, and what are the voices from the field coming up in terms of stories? So we have global stories and local action. That is our panel for the last panel for the day. So moving on to a really fascinating way of presenting stories. This is also new to me, and I have been learning this throughout the last year with Mariam Rabi. She is with SDGs today at the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. So it's a really fascinating way of presenting local stories through pictorial forms, through voices, through poems, through different mediums. So this whole area of storytelling, I learned from Esri, our collaborators, along with SDGs today, and it's really been a fascinating journey. So we've invited Mariam Rabi, who is leading SDGs today, to present her work, as well as also to discuss what is the potential of storytelling for youth and for community leaders. Mariam, over to you.
Okay. Radhika, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Radhika, for the introduction and for giving us the opportunity to share our work and to be here with you today. Hi, everyone. I'm Mariam Rabi, and as Radhika mentioned, I work with an organization called the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. And about a year and a half ago, we partnered with Esri and the National Geographic Society to launch SDGs Today, which is an initiative that promotes the production and use of real-time and timely geospatial data for the Sustainable Development Goals. And just a quick note for those who might not be familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, they're a set of 17 global goals that aim to promote and achieve social justice, economic prosperity, and environmental justice by 2030. In developing this initiative, we've worked with various research groups, nonprofit organizations, UN agencies, and other partners to curate, visualize, and present easy to understand analytics to provide a timely snapshot of sustainable development to policymakers, students, journalists, and other sustainable development stakeholders. In our partnership with Esri, which is the leading company in geospatial or geographic information system software, or GIS, we realized that their ArcGIS story map tool is very powerful and enables data and geospatial driven stories that can reach a wider audience and impact readers anywhere in the world. So ArcGIS Story Maps combines interactive maps with multimedia content, and they've helped us contextualize data, convey why the data matters, and it can be used to tell important narratives about any topic. So what's interesting is that we spend a lot of time trying to find innovative ways to produce a numerical representation for a complex problem. And then we use story maps to contextualize those numbers for a wide range of audiences. So we started working with our partners and collaborators to use GIS to communicate their data and their research through stories. And so we have all of them available on our website, and I'll include a link in the chat when I'm done. So we also partnered with the ArcGIS Story Map team to launch the 2020 ArcGIS Story Maps competition for the SDGs. And we received submissions from over 45 countries, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, who shared their work and their stories with us. And we have links to all of the winning story maps on our website as well. In the summer of 2021, we had the pleasure to partner with the Eco Ambassadors program at Columbia University and Esri's Story Map team to develop a summer curriculum combining SDG 14 topics, which is focused on life below water with GIS and digital storytelling. So we provided a few training workshops. We prepared educational material for participating students so that they can learn how to use ArcGIS tools and share their sustainability projects. Middle school and high school students learned how to map data using ArcGIS online, and they created their own story maps featuring their summer projects. So we had a few sessions where students presented their story maps and walked us through what they had done over the summer. And we were all blown away by the depth of their research and the GIS skills that they demonstrated across the story maps. I personally learned a lot from their work and realized that when we enable students with these technologies, they can take ownership of the narrative around sustainability. They can inform policies and decision-making processes, and that can affect them and their peers. And in some ways, it can also propel a bottom-up approach to learning and curriculum development. I don't come from an education background, so it was an eye-opening experience for me. So I just wanted to share a few of the story maps with everyone. So there was a group of students who noticed a lot of food waste and plastic waste in their cafeteria, so they decided to conduct a food waste audit. And they photographed the whole process to show students and staff, the situation in their school, and they encouraged them to recycle more, purchase more sustainable products, engage in cleaning up waste from a local river, to request composting bins, etc. And the story map also provides a lot of information about how food waste affects oceans and other bodies of water. So this is an example of the story map that was so impactful that it became one of the finalists for the Esri 2021 Storytellers of the Year. Another student presented a story map on how fast fashion and fabric waste impacts the environment and other water bodies, and mapped the findings of a study that traced where and how microfibers end up in the water. And the story map ended with a call to action and feasible steps readers can take to reduce fabric waste. Another group of students received Esri's 2021 Storytellers of the Year People's Choice Award, and their story map is about Yamuna, one of the holiest rivers in Hinduism, which is ecologically and economically significant in India. And the story map talks about how human activities such as deforestation and pollution have impacted the river, and kind of they walk the reader through steps that were taken to revive the river. And also this story map features beautiful artwork, poetry, maps, graphs, and other great visuals. Those were just a few examples of student-led initiatives that I wanted to share with you, and also congratulate all of the eco-ambassadors for their amazing work and showing us that stories combined with data and visualization can transform how we understand and approach challenges. And it provides insight into topics that are not independent from geographic location and socioeconomic challenges that we face. And they can create a community of students that can work on both local and global solutions for similar challenges they might face in different regions. And we did witness the development of such a community of eco-ambassadors over the summer, and it became a space to share knowledge and support each other's work. So we're eager to continue this collaboration with the eco-ambassadors and help amplify their stories. Radhika, thanks for inviting us to be a part of this very important initiative that you and Tara are taking the lead on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam. Definitely look at the website. I think SDGs Today has a lot of information online. So I would definitely suggest all of us to look at the website and take all the story maps and use them in classes, use them in community discussions. It's really been a pleasure to be working with Mariam throughout the summer, with students learning about SDGs and then translating all of that into local consciousness, climate consciousness, and coming up with these story maps. So it's really been an amazing experience for me to learn about these. It has not been, I guess there's a technological hurdle still in many countries. So I hope that in the next few years, this technological hurdle is broken, and we will be able to reach through technology in many countries, even in the most remote possible places. Mariam, just a question from my end on our eco-ambassadors' work. In terms of seeing, it requires some information, some technological know-how. As you know, we had conducted lots of office hours and had worked on the Esri platform. How is that going to be simplified? Do you have learning paths on how story maps can be created and maybe students can learn at their own pace? Any reflections on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do kind of have a step-by-step guide available on our website, where, you know, if you have an existing ArcGIS account, you can use to follow that. You can also create a free and public account if you don't have access, if your school doesn't have access to one. And so we kind of walk you through how to start even thinking about the narrative around your story and then setting up a story map in ArcGIS online. And I can try to look for the links and include that in the chat. But if anyone has any questions about how their school can access Esri licenses, I'm happy to connect them to my colleagues at Esri who can provide more information about that process.
Thank you, Mariam. There's a question or a comment from Akwasi on storytelling and its effectiveness. So storytelling is very effective in implementing climate action and behavior change. Have you seen, I guess the stories are about climate action that most students are taking, but have you witnessed or have you heard about stories that has informed climate action in other countries or in different schools?
I have heard, I mean, I think personally the story maps the Eco Ambassadors created really got me thinking. As I mentioned, a lot of them kind of ended with a call to action and very feasible steps that any of us can take in making our communities more sustainable. And so I do know that story maps have raised a lot of awareness about sustainability and climate issues in different settings and among different communities. It's also helped fundraise for projects. So I've heard in different ways that story maps have supported students and communities and the work that they're doing.
Fantastic. It's such a powerful tool which can go in so many different directions, and just the activity of creating a story map, at least for me, helped me to clear my thoughts, see where should my logical flow go, how can I use the technology to best inform my story, or to use research on, to make sure that the research is accessible and digestible by everyone. I thought that it's a very fascinating tool which we can learn. Unfortunately, I am learning now and not when I was in my school days, but there's always scope to learn more. So I think it's a powerful tool that you have initiated, and thank you for working on the SDGs and creating a tool that matches the SDGs with local storytelling. So that's fascinating. I also want to introduce one of our student volunteers here, Ishan Jain. He has some questions for you, Mariam. Just for everyone's benefit, Ishan Jain is in Melbourne High School, and he is actually our note taker. So he's quietly sitting behind blocked doors and taking all the important notes so that we can put it up for people who have not been able to attend today, and also be able to share it widely. Ishan, if you can introduce yourself and ask your question for Mariam, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I just had a question about, so I had the chance to work with the Esri ArcGIS program over the summer with SDG 14 as I did the program over the summer. And I was really interested, and you said you were planning on continuing this through the education system. And I was wondering how we could implement this in the education system throughout the year. And I wanted to ask how exactly could this be used? Because this is a new topic, right? And I wanted to understand exactly how we could use this in school systems. Yeah.
That's a great question. So I think as part of the Summer Eco Ambassadors program that we worked on, one of our goals was to raise awareness about the role and significance of geospatial data and geospatial tools, and how that can be both a learning tool, but also a tool to communicate the important work that students do, across the community that is concerned with climate and sustainability issues. I know that Esri has great resources available online that helps integrate kind of GIS and story maps lesson into educational curriculum. And I know these are conversations that we've had with Radhika and her team about how we can continue this work and make sure that it reaches more students and more schools. So I am happy to share some of those resources so that it can guide anyone who's interested in integrating that into their education curriculum or their system to kind of walk them through those steps. But I think something that all of us can do is what we did through the summer program, and that is raise awareness about the work that we're doing and how that impacts our communities, and showcasing tools that can better communicate and visualize what's being done.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ishan. Any other questions for Mariam? There are links here in the chat. There is a PBS link, opinion focus stories that have been produced. Mariam, my question for you in terms of story making, there is the technology side, and then there is creating a story. how do you need to have technical know-how on journalism, climate communications? Do you need to have some background on the technology side? There are lots of components to it as we look at the amazing stories that students have created. So in your opinion, how can we bridge the gap, and do we need to have more dialogue and discussions across schools, across districts? What has been your experience?
That's a great question. And I, throughout my career, I'm learning how important the skill of storytelling is in the work that we do. So I feel like I'm always trying to find ways to learn how to get better at doing that. There's actually some really great resources that the ArcGIS Story Maps team has on how to even curate that narrative, how to even get started about thinking about how you want to communicate a story or what you're working on. And so we have that all available and linked to our website, but I'll make sure to include that in the chat. So there are a lot of resources that kind of provide tips and tricks on how to better communicate and tell a story, so that even people that don't come from a sustainability background or a technical background can easily follow and understand the significance of your message. So I'll make sure to include those links in the chat as well.
Thank you, Miriam. In terms of teacher responses, I know you work with teachers also, and Esri has a big program along with you on the SDGs. What has your reflection been for teachers, the participation of teachers in story telling, as well as creating these story maps based on your experience again?
We are involved in different GIS related projects, as you're aware, and we always try to include the ArcGIS Story Map tool as part of the package that we offer in the various collaborations and projects that we do. And that seems to be the first tool that everyone gravitates towards, because it's easy to work with. It's a great way to integrate, as I mentioned, different visuals, different kinds of content, and easy to understand and follow. So it's even through our My School Today initiative, that's one of the things that teachers or professors want to use to communicate the work that they're doing, but then also enable their students so that they can learn how to use the Story Maps tool and share their work with others. So it's been well received with all of the partners and collaborators that we've been working with.
That's fantastic to hear. In terms of SDGs today's vision going forward, where are your main initiatives? And you mentioned about the My Mapping idea, so maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that. And is there a way of collaborating between different schools? If you can elaborate on that through story maps or through other mechanisms that you're planning going forward. Any suggestions?
Yeah, definitely. So since I mentioned My School Today, that's a call to action that we started in order to map schools in Africa. So we've partnered with the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, and we're using their data to locate school and education facilities across the region. And we've developed a model or a data set that calculates the distance of school-age populations to those recorded education facilities. So we're trying to encourage more students and more communities to learn how to georeference their school and become part of the development of this data set. So we're taking kind of a bottom-up approach to how we produce this data set. And so Story Maps plays an important role in that we use it as a educational tool. So we've developed some activities and exercises that students can follow kind of step by step and learn a new geospatial skill. And we've also used it as a way to communicate the call to action and how people, communities and students and teachers can get involved. In terms of it being kind of a tool to connect students and schools. I'll maybe use an example from the Eco Ambassadors program over the summer. I think Tara set up a survey where students were able to submit their projects, and then we could, it would kind of plug into a map. So we were able to see where students were joining us from, and then they had links to their story maps. So we knew that way students would be informed about, you know, oh, there's a group of students in India working on this topic, and I might have some useful data, or I may want to work with them, you know, on a similar project. So it became a tool to also connect the students who are interested in a similar project, or just wanted to connect and exchange and share knowledge to do that through this tool.
Thank you, Mariam. Looks very, very promising, and I hope that we are able to utilize this amazing tool to come up with local stories, have a voice, have poems, have songs, have videos. It's a great way of integrating both visual as well as text mode in the climate story that we are telling. So thank you for coming up with those amazing ideas. Not sure if there are more questions. Jasmine, are there any questions on the Padlet for Mariam? There are suggestions here, Mariam. Kindly share the link of story maps and GIS, which we will do. If you look at the link that Mariam sent on sdgstoday.org storytelling, I think that has some links as well of the story maps.
I'll include more links in the chat too.
Anything else on the Padlet, Jasmine?
No, nothing that I can see right now. I will be pasting all the links that you paste on the chat as well in the Padlet.
Great. Great, thank you, Mariam. We have around 8 minutes or so. If there are any questions for Mariam at this point, anyone can maybe unmute themselves and ask any questions. Has anyone tried these story maps before? Any experience using these story maps?
We're using them. I'm working with our intern, Sean Fitzpatrick. He's actually creating a story map of all the places where New Jersey Audubon has worked with schools or the public. So we can highlight the work of every school that's worked with all our locations. So we're having a lot of fun with it. Google Maps, or I'm sorry, Google Earth has a similar tool. It lets you do a lot of the same functionalities. So we're kind of looking at both.
Fantastic. All these new tools, I think, are fascinating to see how we can integrate all of them in our classroom teaching or in our community-related work. In my town in Melbourne, we've used the story maps to work on pollinators and work on creating April as a month for native plants. And last year, we had mapped out different places in our town to create, where we've created these pollinator gardens, especially our green team in the town has been working on pollinator gardens. So we've marked them, and we've basically tried to work on geospatial mapping as well as stories of what students and community members are saying about monarchs and how they are benefiting and how the yards are benefiting. So I think it's a way of collaborating also, because now I know where I can go and find a pollinator garden that's close to my place and take the children, take the schools, take the communities going forward. So it's more interesting than getting an Excel sheet with some indicators, and then you're like, okay, what do I do with this? It's very interactive and very, I would suggest to, so Mariam has put in lots of links here. And I think it's great that we can start using these links and think of different ways of using our GIS and story mapping. Anne has mentioned, when I work with the NJDA, we use ArcGIS to pinpoint populations of spotted lanternfly when it first arrived in the state. Wow. That's so useful. Ivan is mentioning, I'm a beekeeper and I love the idea of pollinator gardens for pollinators. I am a newly converted native plant lover. So the map really helped me to figure out where things are, and it was for my benefit. And then suddenly, before you know it, it was used by many different people. So it was very helpful for me to get some traction, see who the experts are in my community through a map that I just created, and then have that map as a base to create more dialogue and more discussions with the experts in my community. Mariam has put in links on creating story maps.
Yeah, I'm adding some links. And Radhika, if I'm not mistaken, we did record our training sessions over the summer, and I think there's a YouTube playlist with all of those recordings. So that's also a great resource where you can kind of follow those steps in your own pace and learn how to set up a story map and get started.
Yes, thanks for reminding me, Mariam. We had done a lot of office hours, and there were experts from Esri who had come to explain how the story maps are, and there were students who were interacting to see how much, if they had any questions, if they had any problems in creating a story map. And I thought it was great. All these sessions were great to learn, and it was very hands-on and very engaged. So I would definitely recommend. I'll put in the link of our YouTube channel to see how we can take this idea forward in different ways. Mariam has put in a link on the Eco Ambassador program. Thanks, Mariam. And there we have a lot of story maps that were created by Eco Ambassadors who were learning this for the first time. Because for me, when I saw these amazing story maps that were created by 11, 12 years old, I was like, okay, I don't think I can make such an amazing map. But I think it just helped to go along and be connected to this idea of native plants and pollinators, to use it and be more familiar and get engaged and have all these. It was a learning experience for me, so I definitely recommend the story maps that the Eco Masters have created, just as an overview of what is possible at the school level, and students who did an amazing job, as well as looking at the learning pathways, which is also what Mariam referred to, creating story maps. How do you create it, and what are the different processes? And my vision is that we will be able to use these story maps in creating lesson plans, in using these videos or using these story maps as a part of what teachers are doing, rather than just using YouTube videos or just focusing on what we are working on. There'll be many different dialogues and many different ways of learning if we try to use these story maps as we go along. Great. Any other reflections?
I put this story
Radhika, go ahead.
I put a story map in here that was created by the Pingree School out of Pottsville. It's pretty amazing. They're able to show off their solar panels, their composter, their farm. You can kind of virtually visit their campus, and they tell you about all their initiatives. So I think it'd be pretty cool if all the schools did something like this.
So amazing. Thank you, Alison, for sharing that. Mariam?
Radhika, I just wanted to mention that we'd be happy to continue this work with the Eco Ambassadors, so that if there's interest to learn more about story maps or work on perhaps other SDGs or other climate-related issues, we'd be happy to support that work.
Great. Thank you, Mariam, for the collaboration. And Alison is here. She is really working with the schools and teachers in New Jersey, taking this forward, taking the SDGs and climate education forward. We will definitely get in touch again and see how we can now scale up the Eco Ambassadors program with the story maps that we developed as we go along through, with support from Alison.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mariam, for attending our session. We are 1 minute less than what we had originally planned for, and I see William is already here. So our next panel, our next panel discussion is, so Mariam presented the global stories, and now we are focusing on local action through an amazing teacher who I wish was my teacher in school. So he's the teacher he's a science teacher who I never had when I was a kid. So we have the most amazing William Bertolotti. He's a science teacher in Lineage High School in New York. And he has really helped me to think about science in a very different perspective. So it's great that Will is here, and I won't take a lot of time because I know he has his array of students who are doing such an amazing job of looking at SDGs, taking that framework and using it in schools, for science classes, goes beyond schools, has used story maps. He was one of his students have used story maps. He himself has used story maps. So it's an amazing link between Mariam's tool and how it can be translated into local action in schools. But it requires, definitely for me, it required someone to explain the steps and someone to take me along the journey. And I think Will is that person who can take students along this journey of exploration and goes beyond science. So I'll just hand over to Will to share his work as well as vision with his students.
Greetings, everybody. Just double check. Am I coming in live?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. All right. Well, hello, everybody. Well, thank you to the Center for Sustainable Development for this opportunity to introduce a cohort of exceptional young scientists and their efforts to achieve sustainable development. My name is Will Bertolotti. I'm a research teacher at Lineage High School in North Massapequa, New York, USA. I'm honored to introduce 5 teams of students. Several are just beginning their high school journey. Some see the horizon in view. All are engaged in real college level research centered around sustainability. These students compiled the research literature to identify a key global problem. They explored diverse perspectives, varied approaches, and used their research to articulate solutions. The brief summaries you'll see are the products of hours of reading, composition, brainstorming, and collaboration. They're also the result of troubleshooting failure, of finding their voice, of gaining the independence to discover the world in their own eyes and minds. It's both affirming and crucial that these scientists are so young. They represent the inherent free spirit and incredible potential of the next generation. They're models of what we can all accomplish with guidance and fortitude. They're reminders of our collective responsibility to empower the future caretakers of our world, to provide them with the skills and the outlet to direct their energies. It is our debt to them for leaving them a troubled planet. For the students who've tuned into the Climate Summit, may your peers kindle inspiration. You can learn, you can explore, and you can make your voice heard. May these presentations initiate a productive dialogue on sustainable development, and as their instructor and their mentor, I look forward to the day when our youth know more than their elders. So it's now my pleasure to introduce our first team. I believe, Ahmed, you'll be leading us in. Awesome. All right, give me a brief second to just share the screen. And we are live. View slideshow. Great, all yours.
Hello, my name is Ahmed Hamden, and my group mates are Noah Garcia, Dean Montagnino, and Aryan Mariucola. And we chose UNSCD4 to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. First, we wanted to look at the problem and we saw that current models of education are inefficient and fail to prepare our future global citizens for the technical, ethical, and societal challenges of the ever-changing and developing world. We then saw that we needed to make an overarching solution, which we saw that education must be reformed to prepare students for rising occupations and to help them become respectful and model citizens. We wanted to take a look at new learning approaches, and we saw that they must promote critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, emphasis on relevant subjects, and current significant topics in the real world, with many more skills needed, only the main presented here. And we saw the overall goal of the UN SDG was to achieve inclusive and quality education, and as said, promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. We had a method of looking at the problem, then breaking ourselves up into 4 different subtopics. I, Ahmed Hamdan, looked at the scientific and STEM education as preparation for future occupations. Dean Montagnino looked at the ethics and saw how civic education to mitigate polarization and foster community was important in this field. Noel Garcia looked at the philosophical portion and how the humanities education is needed to promote sustainable mindsets. And Arian Mariukola looked at the futuristic standpoint and how we need to redesign teaching pedagogies with experiential and argument-based learning. I now want to present Dean Montagnino, who will be talking about how polarization in American society needs to be addressed.
Hello, my name is Dean Montagnino, and I focused on the obligation and responsibility of schools to prepare students by addressing controversial topics in a divided society. The extreme polarization within American society, manifesting from contrasting views, limits students' achievement and ability to excel both academically and practically. Thus, teaching students how to approach controversial topics is necessary to provide quality education for all. Politics are becoming increasingly divided, as shown in the presidential approval and satisfaction rate, which has not only been decreasing for the past 4 years, but the trend's fluctuation has severely decreased, maintaining between as low as 45% and as high as 55%. This ceaseless trend shows that politics are separating into even more divided factions, and hostility against the opposition is increasing alongside. Figure 1 displays the political divergence, with the majority of both Democrats and Republicans showing enmity towards each other. This passion, manifesting as frustration, will ultimately lead to direct conflict, which can be seen on January 6th during the Capitol riot. This historical event escalated beyond the privileges of American citizens entitled by the First Amendment, because polarized politics fostered the belief that the opposing side is an existential threat to the prevalence of their opinions. And this is the danger of polarization, the passion that consumes citizens trying to express their freedom, turning what can be a peaceful dispute into a violent competition to elevate one's idea over the other. Increased hostility creates uncertainty within governments as institutions' communication breaks down and they prove unwillingness to negotiate or compromise. Though education can help mend this diversion by teaching future generations critical thinking and how to behave as a citizen, respecting others' views and opinion. This can be accomplished by establishing an environment where debates and discussions can be effectively practiced and ultimately teach students to establish common understanding rather than focus on winning. Buena High School in Sierra Vista, Arizona discussed immigration, where each student was allowed to explore a multitude of perspectives before committing themselves. The teacher discovered that students were more confident and less apt to reply bombastic talk. One student said that I'm not changing my mind, but I think I better think about this more. It's not about changing their opinions, but rather make them appreciate other views and respect their opinions to create a cohesive society. I will now introduce my colleague Noah Garcia discussing the importance of humanities.
Hello, my name is Noah Garcia, and I will be talking about the lack of humanities in the school system. The underteaching of the humanities in our education system leads to the decrease in our population's overall legislation of our innate ethical principles. This can lead to the problems such as decrease in the maintaining of our sustainable development, the decrease in job opportunities, and the population's diminishment of our creativity and critical thinking skills. As seen in these graphs, there's a direct correlation between the amount of majors and the job occupations regarding the humanities. The humanities in our educational system have not been represented as much as they could be.
Hold on, I want to pause 1 second. Are we supposed to be able to see some kind of figures on your slides? Because we cannot see figure number 3 or figure number 4. We just see the title, Lack of Humanities in School Systems, and a description of, thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, anyway, so when certain jobs are not able to, and they're not able to pursue their true academic interests, the humanities in our educational system promotes creativity and allows us to prosper. Human thought is one of the most important long-lasting skills that one must have for their academic career and to access success within that academic career. General education is also important in promoting creativity skills, but the humanities supersede other subjects easily. Imagination allows for the constant realization as well. Without it, we will not be able to flourish and formulate new ideas. One issue that can be addressed and fixed by implementing the humanities into our society is climate change and other major environmental issues. By spreading awareness of these major environmental issues, we can encourage the youth to become involved and possibly make them have the desire to major in these subjects. It is also vital that the governments internationally increase funds in these subjects. With the progression of our society, jobs in our educational system have started to become more and more STEM related. This is not necessarily a bad thing, because STEM education and jobs can lead to the promotion and creation of more clean energy sources. My colleague Ahmed Hamdan will now talk about STEM education.
STEM education is also very immense in combating climate change. As you can see, the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics stats here that wind turbine service technicians and solar photovoltaic installers are the first and third respectively in percent employment growth in the next decade. We see that with an emphasis on certain subjects in education can help us better have employees for these jobs and better suit the public for these topics in the world. We also have to look at biological and medical sciences as nurse practitioners, physical therapist assistants, medical.
1 second, we can't see your figure either. If you could put that on the screen, please. Thank you.
Try moving the mouse. Just double checking. As we move our mouse, does the figure appear?
Now we can see it.
You can. Okay, that's interesting. All right, so maybe our presenters will just refresh as we go. Thank you.
With that, we need an emphasis on these biological sciences, which is a part of STEM, to better equip our students for the rising occupations in the future. We then also want to look at technology as information security analysts and statisticians with data scientists and mathematical science occupations are also growing at a very high rate, as the average rate of growth of jobs is 7.7%, and all of these seen in the figure are 31% and above. Next, we want to look at certain types of learning. Argument-based inquiry learning is very important.
Thank you. Again, we can't see your figures. If you could, thank you.
Sorry for that. We can see that this engaging type of learning really shows growth, as if you see in table 1, descriptive statistics for students' scores on the critical thinking and scientific literacy pre-tests and post-tests. As students were put through a critical thinking and scientific literacy regime, their scores completely shot up on an average of 10 points, as you can see as the average on the top of the statistics in table 1. And the countries that implement these have shown great results. Looking at Finland, we can see that in figure 6, they had one of the top scores of the OECD 2018 PISA reading test exam, with the least amount of learning time in hours per week, as this new argument-based inquiry learning has shown a bigger increase in knowledge in a smaller amount of time. Now, to speak more about the inwards of argument-based learning and new learning approaches, I want to introduce my colleague, Aryan Mariukola, talking about the CREATE model. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Aryan Mariukola. This right here is an example of the experiential learning, where students research and find their own solutions, and also where students expand their knowledge through their own individual efforts. Their goals being understanding the scope of the problem, researching the data to identify solutions, and to identify the solution. And then they finally come up with the prototype and testing a solution to the problem. Shown in this figure, these are examples of real-life situations of STEM occupations, ethics and humanities, and civic participations. Putting students to real-life situations can maximize their learning capabilities. It is very important to consider the right teaching methods that are needed to properly educate our students for the future. The CREATE model and the experiential learning are just two methods that can be used to better teach our students for the future. Education should be properly taught and in the manner of maximizing the knowledge and efforts by the individual. Therefore, these methods and models should be prioritized and encouraged in more schools. Thank you. I will again introduce Amel.
We want to thank ArcGIS and Story Maps, which helped us implement figures into our individual research reports, which we then used in this team presentation. Next, and finally, we want to look at our overall conclusion. We saw and we looked at literature approaches, how these new learning approaches that are engaging are monumental in the development of quality and equitable education for all, along with an emphasis on certain subjects such as the humanities, STEM, and polarizing topics in society. I want to thank you for your time, and we will now give it off to Mr. Bertolotti. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that was our first team, and now it's my honor to present our second team. We'll be focusing on UNSDG number 9, Industry, Innovation, and Infrastructure. And here I'm welcome to introduce our team leader, who will be Olivia.
Hello, my name is Olivia Mastrangelo. This is Teresa Reed and Amanda Siri. We're focusing on UNSDG number 9, Industry, Innovation, and Infrastructure.
So we want to thank you again for our time today. Again, we are Olivia Mastrangelo, Tessa Reed, and Amanda Siri. So we discussed the topic of sustainable development in the prevention of climate change, as we decided to focus on the economy. Economic failure is responsible for a majority of the pollution. To prevent this climate change from progressing, the issue must be solved through the lens of economic development.
It's essential to view the problem the same way it originated, as to better comprehend how to avoid it. Pollution is perpetuated by desire for money because cheap materials are easily accessible, but those same materials are cheap because they pollute. Greed is perpetuated by the marketing of unsustainable economic processes as convenient through the inconvenient for the future. According to the Swiss Re Institute, the world economy is set to lose up to 18% gross domestic product from the climate change if no action is taken. Accessibility is the solution.
To promote accessibility, we need monetary action, not a change in mentality. The mentality change will follow behavior change because we need to appeal to what drives society rather than people's morals. Our society is dominated by desire for money. Therefore, an appeal to conscience won't work. It will only turn people away from our cause as many look for a convenient solution. The solution presented before us will be our motivation to act collectively. When a goal seems feasible, it is more likely to be pushed to be achieved. To defeat global warming, we propose the reverse engineering of the marketing strategies of corporations who contribute to pollution to fit our costs. Economic reform through the redistribution of subsidies and funding to make sustainable food, goods, and travel accessible is essential. The prioritization of the marketing of sustainable alternatives over those that pollute the environment will achieve this. Maximizing convenience and accessibility will lead to success.
We're going to let Amanda Siri take the floor.
Hello, my name is Amanda Siri, and I'm going to be talking about the access to quality foods in the United States. A large amount of income comes from the fast food industry. We as a nation need to recognize that this food is unhealthy for us in our world. In 2020, Paycheck Protection Program loans were distributed in the hopes of preserving small businesses and helping them amidst the pandemic. Once the data was released that showed the recipients of these checks, large corporations such as Taco Bell, Wendy's, and Pizza Hut were all seen receiving very large amounts of money, all over $3 million. Not only do these companies not need the money to support themselves, as companies such as Taco Bell receive about $9.8 billion annually, but these CCTV companies are taking advantage of how PPP loans work. They have no obligation to pay back the money if it's spent on quality expenses such as payroll or rent. It's efficient if food can be prepared quickly, but the food being prepared are packed with GMOs that harm us and are being produced with pesticides on farms that are harming the environment. According to the Global Collaborative Network FAIR, there are 3 ways in which the fast food industry is negatively affecting the environment: its use of land, its consumption of water, and its emission of greenhouse gases. Dairy and meat farms that are used to continue providing fast food chains with products are estimated to be using about as 10% of global water flows, and the land that these farms occupy often promote deforestation and divert resources from other valuable needs, all for economic gain. Along with this, these farms are responsible for the extreme production of greenhouse gases, including methane emissions. Many of these corporations turn a blind eye to the plenty of negative effects that they cause solely because they're economically driven. There are non-GMO preservative-free foods out there. They're just not as accessible to all people. The GLP reports that non-GMO labeled products can cost consumers up to 62% less in stores. And many studies have been done reporting on how prices compare from standard grocery stores versus how stores that specifically sell products that are non-GMO and preservative-free. Due to cheap prices of fast food, many people choose this food over overpriced quality foods. We need to start taking action against all these large fast food corporations that keep being supported. Their actions negatively affect the well-being of its consumers and its environment as well. Cutting government funding to these companies or implementing laws on GMO and pesticide uses are all solutions that can be used to help our environment in the larger picture. Along with reducing the negative effects of fast food, we need to make sure that everyone has the access to quality food and that it is not costly to the people. A large step in creating a healthier community is ensuring that all people have access to quality food. The people living in this world hold the fate of future generations and our generation in their hands, and we need to take the first step to ensure that our world today and our world tomorrow is being treated right. Thank you, and I'm now going to be giving the floor to Olivia Mastrangelo.
All right. Through the reformation of unsustainable economic practices, we can end climate change. For the sake of preserving economic success, unsustainable practices have been used, which have perpetuated pollution, specifically plastics pollution. The problem of plastic pollution has been increasing since the material was introduced to the market. It instantly caught on because of its portrayal as a cheaper and safer alternative to ivory and glass. Easily disposable after one use, it's highly convenient and appealing to buyers. The perpetuation of consumerism has caused overproduction of plastic. More plastics have been made over the past 2 decades than during the second half of the 20th century. Though it seems to be, plastic is not a convenient commodity to dispose of. A single plastic bottle spends centuries waiting to decompose once it ends up in a landfill, or worse, in the ocean. Out of 8.3 billion metric tons manufactured, only 9% of plastic produced has been recycled. Overproduction of plastic, coupled with a failure to recycle properly, has led to global plastics pollution. But why has this problem been so difficult to change? The answer lies in accessibility. Easy access to plastic has permitted society to develop a dependency despite its detrimental effects on our future. Goods we use daily contain plastic. Polyester is found in our clothing, and PET is used to carry food and water in. Plastic groups lobby to protect themselves while degrading the environment. 42% of Americans now live in states where local bans on plastic are prohibited. Money has allowed this cycle of environmental ruin to persist. Therefore, the solution is derived from the economy. If we make alternative products more accessible than plastic, we can decrease plastic pollution. Funding to manufacturers of alternatives will increase accessibility. Decreasing the political and economic power of plastics companies will allow us to eliminate this addictive material from our lives. Recycling must be reformed as an institution rather than one funded by the plastic industry. Repurposing of plastic must become an obligation of the government for it to be effective. Depleted stock will be replaced with plastic material until a sustainable alternative such as sugar baggies becomes popularized. Marketing plastic as inconvenient while marketing alternatives as truly accessible is the key to preserving our environment. All the plastic we have produced will not degrade for centuries to come. And I propose this system not as one that will withstand time, but as the first step in reconciling our relationship with the environment. I'll now introduce Teresa Reed once again.
Transportation is arguably the foundation of our society. It's how we see our friends, our family, how we get to the workplace and make money, how we get to the grocery store to buy our food. Current systems of transportation are over-reliant on cars. The problem lies in the emissions of fossil fuels and the environmental and economic impacts on increased motor vehicle travel. After World War II, economic growth, population growth, and rapid urbanization led to the increased reliance on personal vehicles for transportation, leading to a rapid increase in the number of cars and trucks in the United States, along with a rapid increase in the number of highways. In addition to carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, and particulate matter emissions, the transportation sector releases large quantities of greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and hydrofluorocarbons. When emissions from electricity are distributed among end-use sectors, transportation was responsible for about 28.7% of all greenhouse gas emissions emitted in the United States in 2019, second only to the industrial sector.
To increase economic inequality, to decrease economic inequality and emissions of fossil fuels, we can increase the access to public transportation and the use of alternate forms of travel. A large issue is that the suburbs and rural areas are designed so that personal cars are necessary. If we take Long Island, for example, it is necessary for you to have a car if you have any hopes of getting to work or the grocery store, as walking would be way too time consuming. In places such as Manhattan, for example, transportation is looked at as a parallel model instead of the linear model, where all forms of transportation are looked at as equally valuable instead of the linear model, where it is assumed that the latest invention is the most beneficial. However, when we look at the cities, we run into the issue of traffic congestion due to the large number of individuals, meaning that creating a parallel model is simply not enough. We should additionally focus on investments being made for the reformation of transportation infrastructure, making public transportation more accessible. Again, in the case of cities, we can argue that the subways are public transit, and yet traffic congestion is still an issue. Therefore, efforts should continue beyond subways. Something we need to take into account is that 80% of 625 million motorized vehicles were for passenger transport, meaning that if we combine the passengers in, say, a bus, for example, we can decrease the amount of cars on the road, consequently decreasing fossil fuel emissions. Furthermore, if we look through the lens of economic inequality, $39 per week is spent on transportation may be infeasible, especially in an area as expensive as a city such as Manhattan. Providing free public transportation would not only be more cost efficient for the city, for the average citizen who either spends about $58 per week on gas for their personal vehicle or about $39 per week on public transportation, leading to a decrease in economic inequality, but vehicle use imposes external costs that can offset direct economic gains. Therefore, with implementation of free public transportation, there will be a decrease in personal vehicles use and consequently increasing the access for the employment and leading to economic gains. Thank you. I will now reintroduce my group members to close our presentation. A special thanks to all the people who made and released these awesome resources for free. ArcGIS was used to create a compilation of our information and add in visual aids such as maps. Corrupt economic policies on part of the industry figureheads by enacting illegal change.
Legal change by regulating lobbyists and government funding will bring about what we need.
What we propose is bringing alternatives to the market. We think by doing this, plenty of our problems may be able to be resolved, and hopefully we can come to a final conclusion solution.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I'm now ready to introduce our first team of freshman students, Lesia and Julia. They're working currently on a review of the literature on biofuels. Thank you.
Hello, nice to meet all of you. Our names are Lesia and Julia Jufrida. We're twin sisters and attend Plainage High School on Long Island, New York, where we're completing our freshman year. We're an ambitious pair who feel fervently about the prosperity of our planet. After reading about the United Nations 17 Goals for Sustainable Development, it left us intrigued to learn more about renewable energy. With the help of Dr. Radhika Iyengar from the Center of Sustainable Development at Columbia University, we've had the opportunity to connect with students across the world. Since the beginning of the school year, we've been working closely with numerous boys and girls schools in India and students throughout the country on environmental-based research projects. Our goal is to publish a review of literature for our collaborative personal study on algal biofuels by the end of this scholastic year.
Algal biofuels are dense layers of photosynthetic aquatic plants that grow in lakes and other bodies of water. These habitats contain high amounts of nutrients, like phosphorus, which algae thrives on. Some species of algae can even survive on snow. Algae has the ability to sequester carbon dioxide from the atmosphere through the process of photosynthesis. Research shows that 1 kilo of algae uses 1.87 kilos of carbon dioxide a day, and 1 acre of algae uses 2.7 tons of carbon dioxide a day. Biofuels are any fuel that are derived from biomass, which can be described as renewable organic material like plants and animals. Modern biofuels can help to reduce pollution and lower levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. They also release oxygen, benefiting aerobic plants and animals.
Advantages of algal biofuel. The product of microalgal biofuels increases ethanol production by 6-fold in comparison to corn and produces 40 times more biodiesel than soy bioethanol production. The burning of dry algal biomass releases more oxygen and less carbon dioxide than current fossil fuels, which in turn increases the atmospheric ratio of oxygen to carbon dioxide. According to Lillian Young, writing for the Spartan Newsroom, algae is 12 times more potent as a biofuel than leading crops like corn, soy, and switchgrass. Another potential use of algal biofuels can be in vehicles. Algae farming doesn't jeopardize the food supply like corn or soy biofuels would, as it utilizes fewer resources and can be cultivated on marginal lands. economic and job opportunities generated from algal biofuels. Renewable energy from landfill gas or biomass plants have a higher number of jobs created per unit of energy produced than conventional energy resources. Recent studies attest that renewable energy projects can counteract job losses from declining in extractive industries and in lieu generate a net employment gain. The International Renewable Energy Agency, also known as IRENA, and the International Labor Organization reported some 12 million jobs in renewable energy and its supply chains in the year 2020, which increased by 500,000 since 2019.
Alternative uses of algae as bioproducts. Algae has been found to contain properties useful for the development of biodegradable bioplastics. It can be manufactured using protein and carbohydrate-based polymers from algal blooms. Microalgae have short harvesting lives and can produce various polymers such as starch, cellulose, PHA, and PHB. Polymers from algae can be augmented through genetic engineering and have the possibility of replacing traditional plastics. We recently finished writing our first draft for a review of literature, which we are aiming to finalize and publish within the next few months. Our next goal is to establish and strengthen collaboration with schools across the globe, which we've been doing since December. Our next and biggest aim is to reach out to various laboratories across Long Island to begin harvesting algae for biofuel. We would like to discuss our review of literature draft, which is split into different subsections, including the detriments of climate change to human health and our environment, an analysis on biofuels, an in-depth study of algae, and how algal biofuels can benefit us and the economy. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Thanks, everybody. And just for reference, I'll try to ensure that the link to their draft review of literature is shared with everybody. Well, my next group is another team of freshmen who are interested in looking at the impacts of global climate change on the distribution of mosquitoes in our local area, Long Island, New York. And I'm honored to introduce Cheyenne Jorder, who will lead this discussion. Cheyenne?
Hello, my name is Cheyenne Jorder, and my colleagues Sabrina Johnson and Kevin Marr have been planning on doing a longitudinal report on the mosquito species within Long Island presently. We want to analyze the mosquito species reports from previous years in order to see any sort of change within the recent years. As you might know, higher climate areas such as humid areas have a large catalyst for attracting certain mosquito species such as the Aedes aegypti or the Aedes albopictus. These have been recently reported, and in fact, a Nassau County mosquito control report has got 1,257 mosquitoes over the span of 2008. This accounted for about 6.58% of the mosquito population, and it was the fourth highest mosquito species, which is very peculiar. These mosquito species have the possibility of infection, diseases such as dengue fever or Zika virus. While these are rare, a higher concentration would make these diseases more prevalent. Here are the two mosquitoes that can, such as the Culex pipian mosquitoes. These are the common types of mosquitoes, and they pose no danger. The Aedes aegypti and the Aedes albopictus have a possibility of possible danger due to certain diseases they could contract. The image you see above is a picture of the Aedes albopictus. Here are multiple graphs. You can see the Aedes aegypti population has not reached New York yet, and that's why we have lower numbers of their concentration, while the Aedes albopictus have reached New York at a higher standard, and they're likely to be seen. And this is depicted through the report that we have claiming it to be the fourth most common mosquito species within Long Island. And to your right, you see a chart that most likely is able to predict the range of mosquito concentration in the future. It's reaching higher longitudes, and this indicates that climate change is playing a role. Now, I would like to bring in my colleague Sabrina Johnson in order to show us the changes within the weather.
Hi, so as Cheyenne previously mentioned, climate plays a very large role in determining mosquito activity rates and infection rates. So my main research consisted of tracking historical temperatures I did this so by tracking weekly temperatures ranging from October of 2020 to October of 2021. I found that the data suggests that temperatures are generally a cyclic pattern. They decrease during late August to January and begin increasing in February to July, repeating annually. Before I move forward, I like to mention that mosquitoes are a cold-blooded species. They lack the ability of regulating their internal temperatures. Therefore, they function best in warmer temperatures because they rely on their external environments. That temperature they function best at is about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and around 50 degrees Fahrenheit, they stop functioning altogether. As indicated in the graph, the months of June through September are typically their peak, meaning that the given months are typically when the populations increase. And what does this mean for us? In these warmer temperatures, the months of June through September on Long Island, these dangerous species that Cheyenne mentioned, such as Iatus albopictus, experienced an increase of activity and comfort. Therefore, a rise in interactions with not only each other, but with humans as well, increasing the possibility of spreading these infections. Thank you, and I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, Kevin Marr.
Hello. My name is Kevin Marr, and our goals for data collection are to identify spikes in population based on temperature, and also identify which mosquito species are most active at different times, identify samples by DNA extraction and identification to add on to previous data collected by others. We're also planning on, at some point in the future, utilizing machine learning to create a sorting program based on species. The system we'll use to collect specimens will be traps located in different places throughout the plain edge area to be emptied every other day. They'll be stored in frozen ethyl alcohol until later use. And then we'll collect the actual data according sex and species of mosquito. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So I have one last presentation. It's Cheyenne again. And in this case, Cheyenne is actually leading his own exploration of microplastics in our local area. It was inspired by previous students' efforts in documenting just the scope of microplastics pollution in the New York region. So Cheyenne, to close it out.
Hello, as you may remember, my name is Cheyenne Jurther, and I'm doing a recent report on how ocean currents have an effect on the concentration of microplastics. This can later impact the aquaculture population that consumers from the public will later consume. Over here, you might already know that microplastics come from public consumer products, and they are plastic debris that are less than 5 centimeters in diameter. In fact, multiple industries contribute to this. In the synthetic textile industry, packaging industry, and the rubber industry play an important role. These can be found in the figure to your right. This has a major effect on aquaculture. Aquaculture is very important to society. In fact, about 17% of animal-based proteins and about 6.7% of plant and animal-based proteins are from the aquaculture industry. The microplastics are able to enter the digestive tracts of various marine organisms. Shellfish are most affected by this. In fact, some reports have stated that 20% of aquaculture from Makassar, Indonesia have been found with microplastics, while 25% of commercial fish within Los Angeles has also been discovered with microplastics. Here we have a UV photography of these microplastics within the digestive tract that's tracked by fluorescent Nile red staining. We have multiple types of microplastics, such as microbeads, microfibers, tire dust, nurdles. These are all very common. This can play a public health risk. In fact, many reports have stated that a large concentration of microplastic consumption can lead to developmental issues, cancer, and thyroid effects. More research is needed to fully definitively discover this. However, some works have been done. Ocean currents can play an effect of the concentration. Many reports have voiced the concern that the concentration will accumulate depending on where the ocean currents go to. Contamination of these local agriculture can in fact increase the possibility of some cancer or thyroid deficiencies. Over here in this graph, you can see that microplastics are traveling from the land to sediment drips where they are settling and a microplastic hotspot is being created. Here you can see an image of microplastics all over the world. It's separated into white and dark categories. White categories represent more microplastics within this area. Our proposed research plan takes a look at Long Island, which is affected by the Gulf Stream ocean currents. It's more likely that concentration will be towards the eastern side of Long Island. We hope to collaborate with many local fishermen and agriculture industry representatives in order to capture these shellfish. We will be sampling locations that vary by longitude, and our main task is to discover how these changes affect the concentration of microplastics. Our sample and analysis and post-processing include a centrifuge, which will apply with 30% hydrogen peroxide. We'll incubate this in about 74 degrees Celsius to evaporate water and other liquids, leaving only microplastics. We will be using a fluorescent dye that's called Nile Red. This will be stained by 0.01 grams, and later we'll have an analysis with a UV microscope. We can discover different polymers through the staining and through fluorescent colors and the different types, as can be seen from this figure right here. For future studies, we're thinking of doing an experiment which will have two tanks with the same water condition found within the ocean, and we will, for one of the tanks, we will add a kelp farm because kelp is known to have some enzymatic functions, as well as it can capture many microplastics that are hard to get out of the ocean. And we will be testing this on multiple concentrations to see the effectiveness. Once we discover this, we hope to provide a possible solution for this problem. Thank you, and that was my presentation.
Thanks, Cheyenne. All right, thank you so much for giving these students the opportunity to share their work. And my hope is, although students and teacher alike, we're all works in progress. My hope is that you're able to see in their voices today just that raw potential, right? That raw potential that really deserves the opportunity to be challenged, the opportunity to be nurtured, and the opportunity to really engage in individualized experiential learning, right? All students really are, our world's future. And we really do owe the next generation the opportunity to engage and explore. So thank you so much, everybody. And I guess on the interest of time, maybe if you have any individual questions for either the students or myself, I welcome you to email me or Dr. Yengar. And I just look forward to turning, all these aspirations on the part of our youth into concrete, tangible action. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Will. That was truly amazing and just makes me think about, again, as you're saying, potential and also to cross collaborate, because especially, on the mosquitoes, microplastic, different ways of investigation, as well as cross collaboration between the schools is definitely something that we should be doing. And again, thinking through these ideas with Alison later on, maybe we can come up with something that is more collaborative. But those were an amazing set of presentations, truly amazing. And thank you for sharing all that important work as we go along. Will, I think it will give all of us some new ideas on how we can work with our students, families to nurture this raw talent, as you said. Thank you so much for your time and for all the student presentation. Jasmine has sent a Padlet, so please feel free to add your comments, questions on the Padlet. It will be open throughout the 3 days, and it will be good to share your questions and ideas with the students also through the Padlet. So having said that, I think we will close this session for tonight, unless Alison wants to say something else. Alison?
No, this was fantastic. Actually, a group of your students reminds me of a group of students here in Jersey City. They called themselves the Trappiskitos. I'd love to put you in touch with their teacher and see what other, but they were middle school students and I'm going back 5 years ago, but it was very similar research. It's when Zika was in the news. So very exciting stuff.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll reconvene tomorrow for another set of presentations, discussions, and new ideas to carry our climate education work forward. This is really set the stage for the rest of the days as well for us. So thank you so much for being around and sharing all your wonderful work. Take care. Have a good night.